The story unfolds on a rainy night inside a building where three men are gathered. Outside, guards stand watch. Inside, two men sit engaged in an important conversation, while the third, a servant, stands by. One of the seated men, Jean Libong, the Grandmaster of the Treasure Merchant Alliance, is recounting his bitter encounter with someone he calls a wicked demon. This man not only seized all his assets but also cruelly cut off his fingers. Libong warns the other man, known as the Phantom, who is widely regarded as the best assassin in Jianghu, not to underestimate this demon, as he is formidable enough to warrant hiring Phantom for revenge. Phantom, ever the professional, inquires whether Libong has any identifying details about this wicked demon, perhaps a portrait or a sketch. Libong hesitates momentarily before revealing that the only striking characteristic is the demon's handsomeness. He continues, recounting how he first encountered the demon by chance at a drinking party. The demon's charm, kindness, and wit were far from ordinary, especially for someone only 20 years old. His vast knowledge and travels across the Central Plains made him an intriguing figure. For 2 months, Libong spent time with this man, but it was only once, during a drunken display of martial arts, that Libong realized the man's true nature. The servant then opens a locker, revealing to Phantom a mark left behind by the so-called wicked demon after his demonstration. The mark, to Phantom's shock, was the unmistakable trace of the Thunderbolt Sword, a secret martial technique of Nang Lisang, one of the 10 greatest martial masters of Jianghu. Phantom is astonished, having only heard rumors about the Thunderbolt Sword. Libong elaborates, explaining that Nang Lisang had disappeared years ago during the Great War between the Orthodox Alliance and the demonic cult, vanishing after the conflict ended 20 years ago. At first, Libong couldn't believe the connection either, but his suspicions were confirmed when he saw the martial arts manual in the wicked demon's possession. Libong is certain that this man must have killed Nang Lisang and stolen his secret technique, a treasure worth more than 1,000 gold coins. The likes of the Sword of Life and Death and the 100 Great Masters of Jianghu all coveted it. Even Qion Muak, the renowned demon sword and one of the 10 greatest masters, sought after the demon, but none returned. Libong recounts his frustration, telling Phantom that each time he sent someone after this wicked demon, the man would find him. Not only did he sever Libong's fingers and take his fortune, but he also had the audacity to claim that it felt good, and there was no reason he shouldn't take everything Libong owned. Phantom, shocked yet contemplative, reflects on the story. It's hard to believe a 20-year-old could defeat someone like Qion Muak, but Libong's missing fingers tell no lies. Libong implores Phantom to kill this wicked demon, whose name is Jeek Legion, and restore justice. In another scene, Phantom approaches a servant sweeping the compound and asks to be shown the room where Legion once stayed. The servant obliges, leading Phantom through the building and speaking highly of Legion, mentioning how considerate he had been to even lowly servants during his stay. Phantom, however, remains skeptical, mentally noting how some see Legion as a warm-hearted person, while others paint a very different picture. Phantom had already done his own investigations, questioning other servants about the man. Some call him the elegant young master, while others remember him as a wealthy man who lost all his assets. To some, he's known as a fool who gambles away his money, claiming it's all for his future fortune. The final piece of information Phantom receives is that Legion competed in the Muram tournament, further complicating Phantom's understanding of who this man truly is. Legion seems to have many faces, and Phantom grows irritated, wondering who exactly this man is. The man leading him informs him that the room ahead was where Master Legion once stayed, and advises Phantom to take his time exploring it. Phantom opens the door and steps inside, scanning the room for anything out of the ordinary. The only peculiar thing he finds is a map on the wall with a point circled and labeled with the words Conquer Hub. This clue excites Phantom, as he finally feels like he's uncovered Legion's next destination, Hub, where 2 Muram tournaments are scheduled to be held this year. He hears a voice behind him. Startled, Phantom spins around but is knocked out cold before he can react. When he regains consciousness, he finds himself pinned to the wall, with 3 individuals seated in front of him, casually drinking tea. One of them asks the others why Legion went to Hub, to which the other man replies, "How would I know what's going on in that dark head of his?" The only woman among them suggests they also head to Hub, as they have nothing else to do. However, the man seated to her right advises against it, warning that Jianghu would be thrown into chaos if she made an appearance. She then turns to Phantom and offers him a drink. As Phantom notices the energy radiating from the old woman and the scythe tied around her waist, he realizes that she is none other than the Supreme Demon Empress, Yang Hong, once the most trusted ally of the Heavenly Demon. The symbol on the other man's sword confirms that he is Nang Li Sang, the Thunderbolt Sword, who had gone into hiding. Shocked, Phantom realizes that he is in the presence of some of the most powerful figures in Jianghu, including Qion Wak, the Demon Sword, who exudes an ominous demonic aura. Seeing them all together, Phantom grasps that they are allied with Legion. Phantom demands to know why they haven't killed him. The old woman explains that they made a promise not to kill without permission, but they have destroyed his chi center and severed a tendon in his leg. Noticing that Phantom doesn't react, she adds, "I heard assassins don't fear death. They usually keep poisonous pills hidden in their teeth." Phantom, with a sad smile, realizes they are suggesting he kill himself. Resigned to his fate, he bites down on the poison pill hidden in his mouth. Before his death, Phantom bitterly comments that Legion is lucky to have protectors like them. The three masters respond that Legion doesn't need their protection. With that, Phantom succumbs to the poison. In the next scene, our protagonist, Legion, stands with two swords strapped to his back, confronting a group of martial artists. These typical side characters, as expected, arrogantly act as if they are in control. One of them exclaims with glee, "We've finally found you. Hand over the book containing the secret technique." His superior, however, cautions him not to be overconfident, reminding him that many masters have died seeking out Legion. He unsheathes his sword and steps forward, taunting Legion for being so fearless despite his age. But before the man can finish his sentence, Legion strikes, sending him flying and killing him instantly. Seeing their leader killed, the rest of the group charges at Legion in a rage. But with nothing more than a single finger, he blocks their swords. In swift succession, Legion dispatches the first two attackers, and one by one, the rest fall without offering much resistance. In a matter of minutes, they are all defeated, and Legion hadn't even drawn his swords, he only used his bare hands. After the fight, muses to himself, the story then shifts to a broader context, recounting the Great War between the Orthodox faction and the demonic cult. This battle raged on for 13 years, leaving an endless trail of tears, bloodshed, and despair. The war abruptly ended one day with an unexpected truce, though the details of this agreement remain a mystery even 20 years later. Both the Heavenly Demon cult and the Orthodox Alliance have maintained a strange silence since. As time passed, new factions began to rise within Jianghu, while others, weakened by the war, struggled to regain their former glory. One such weakened family is the Righteous Sword sect, where a young woman named Zhang Cherian is practicing her swordsmanship. Frustrated, she wonders why she cannot break through to the 7-star realm. Determined to master the Red Dead sword art and restore her family's honor, she feels stuck in her training. Her sister, Zhang Han, and brother-in-law approach her during this moment of frustration. Zhang Han, the eldest daughter of the Righteous Sword sect leader, brings surprising news: a swordsman from the Junin clan, named Zhang, has arrived and wishes to compete with Cherian in the Dragon and Phoenix tournament. Shocked, Cherian knows that this tournament is one of the two most prestigious martial arts competitions in the Central Plains. While the Heavenly Dragon tournament is a battle for honor and life, the Dragon and Phoenix tournament is a contest for young martial artists competing in pairs. Cherian, however, is not pleased. The idea of pairing up with someone, especially the perverted bastard Yunyin, is unacceptable to her. She refuses angrily, lashing out at her sister. Zhang Han, remaining calm, advises her younger sister to listen before making up her mind. The conversation continued as Zhang Han sighed, telling her younger sister, "You've always said you'd bring honor to our clan's name. If you get selected for the Dragon and Phoenix tournament, you'll gain great prestige." But before she could finish, Cherian cut her off angrily, storming away. Meanwhile, elsewhere in a bustling marketplace, merchants were busy selling their goods. Some men stood under an umbrella, talking excitedly about the latest news that the Grandmaster had lost yet another finger. They were overjoyed, feeling as though someone had exacted justice on their behalf. As they gossiped, Cherian walked past them, looking weary. She muttered to herself, "What if the Junin clan holds a grudge and retaliates against our family? Do they think they can do whatever they want just because they're a powerful clan?" Her thoughts grew darker as she observed the people of Jianghu, who constantly schemed, deceived, and hurt one another. Trickery seemed to be running rampant, and Cherian began to question the ideals she had once cherished. Is this really the Jiang who I dreamed of, she wondered, standing still in contemplation. Suddenly, she heard someone behind her. Legion appeared, seemingly out of nowhere. He had overheard her thoughts and chimed in with his own, saying, I've had similar thoughts. After all, the Heavenly Demon's 9 Calamities demon technique, also known as the Invisible Demon Art, can't be defeated in a one-on-one battle. The idea that the Great War between the Orthodox Alliance and the demonic cult ended in such a simple manner is hard to believe. Cherian turned around, surprised by the strange man who seemed to know so much. She thought to herself, who is this guy? Legion, calm and collected, suggested, I'm thirsty. Let's grab a drink, why don't you show me the way since this is my first time in Wuhan? Firmly, she told him, if you're a martial artist, you shouldn't act like a worthless bum. I've got other matters to attend to, so I'll be leaving now. But just as she turned to go, Legion asked her a pointed question, do you really think this current Jianghu has any real value? His question caught her off guard. She paused and turned back to him. What do you mean by that? She asked. Legion explained, ideals and chivalry have long been abandoned. What's left is this Jianghu, which is nothing but a pathetic facade. Cherian found his words insulting to Jianghu, but instead of getting angry, she stayed composed. If Jianghu is so bad, why are you still living in it? She challenged him before walking away, muttering to herself, this Jianghu isn't as bad as he claims. Her words left an impression on Legion, and as the two parted ways, he couldn't help but think about her. A few hours later, inside the Hang Inn, the place was bustling with customers. One man was excitedly telling his friends about how extraordinary the upcoming Dragon and Phoenix tournament would be. He confidently claimed that the top candidate this year would undoubtedly be Swordsman Yang from the Khan family. His companions disagreed, arguing that Swordsman Yang from the NX sect shouldn't be underestimated either. While they were debating, Cherian entered the inn, wondering if the crowd had gathered because of the tournament. As she stood there looking a bit lost, one of the inn's attendants approached her. Aren't you young Lady Zhong from the Righteous Sword sect? He asked. What brings you here alone? I just wanted a light drink, she replied, trying not to draw attention to herself. The attendant, looking slightly disappointed, informed her, the only available seats are in the special room. But since you're Wuhan's best, I'll give you a bit of a discount. Hearing that she was regarded as Wuhan's best, the entire room turned to stare at her, which made Cherian feel awkward. She silently wondered who had spread such rumors about her. To her surprise, she saw the same strange guy again. Legion greeted her with a grin. If I'd known we'd run into each other again, I would have come with you in the first place, he teased. Cherian sighed to herself, thinking that her luck was truly strange today. She ended up sitting at one of the tables, feeling down. After a brief silence, Legion picked up a chicken thigh and casually asked her, do you know how to register for the tournament? Cherian was taken aback by the amount of food Legion was devouring. Are you really thinking about entering the tournament? She asked, incredulous. He then added with a smirk, I've been traveling for 10 years, and everywhere I go, girls chase after me. Cherian was stunned by his words, thinking to herself that this guy was completely different from how he had been earlier. Was he always this kind of flirt, or had she misjudged him entirely? As Legion bit into a chicken thigh, he said, even though I've seen countless beautiful women in Jianghu, I've realized that the most beautiful woman is my mother. Cherian raised an eyebrow and asked, are you really sure it's your mother? Legion's eyes narrowed into a dangerous glare. Are you disrespecting my mother just because she's old? He demanded. Startled, Cherian panicked, waving her hands. Legion calmly picked up a shrimp from his plate and said, anyway, I've been feeling nervous about a big event coming up. As they continued their conversation, a man entered the room, his voice interrupting them. I thought I heard a familiar voice, he said. Aren't you young Lady Zhong from the Righteous Sword sect? It's been a while. The man's name was Zhang Injial, successor of the Jiangshan clan. He had entered with his younger sister, Zhang Ina, and was clearly intending to drink in the room. He fixed his gaze on Cherian and asked, how have you been all this time? Cherian, feeling uncomfortable, thought to herself, Injial's habit of scanning me up and down is as strong as ever. She wanted to hit him, but restrained herself. Seeing that she didn't reply, Ingeol turned his attention to Legion, who was sitting calmly at the table. After a few seconds, Ingeol pulled a gold coin from his pocket and tossed it onto Legion's plate. "This should cover the bill. If you're done eating, please leave." Legion gave Ingeol a piercing glare but remained calm. "I don't think this is enough. There's more food coming." Ingeol, taken aback, sneered. "You bastard, get lost while I'm still being nice." He laughed as he noticed Legion's weapon. "Are you acting cocky because you're a Jianghu fighter?" Curious about Legion's sword, Ingeol reached out to lift it, but stopped midway, realizing it was impossibly heavy. Shocked, he tried again, using his internal energy to raise it a few inches off the ground, but that was all he could manage. He let out a weak laugh, trying to cover up his embarrassment. "You must use this blade to train your muscles," he said, hoping to save face. The others quickly agreed, not believing that the sword could be that heavy. But to their surprise, Legion effortlessly picked up the sword, placed it on his shoulder, and said, "It's not for training." Ingeol, growing agitated, snapped, "Stop lying. It's obviously a training tool." They bickered for a moment until Ingeol, furious, unleashed his energy. Before the situation could escalate, Cherian stepped in, telling them to stop. Her sudden intervention caught everyone off guard, even Ingeol. "Why are you looking at me like that?" he asked, smirking. "Are you interested in me?" He then grabbed her hand and added, "We'll be joining the Dragon and Phoenix tournament together anyway. It's a good idea to get to know each other before then." Cherian immediately pulled her hand away. "I'm sorry, but I've decided to participate with someone else." Ingeol was shocked by her rejection. "Why won't you participate with me?" he asked. Cherian replied firmly, "Because using your family's influence to force things onto me is a petty and shameful act." Ingeol, unprepared for such a bold response, calmed himself and asked, "Who are you participating with, then?" Before Cherian could answer, Legion casually said, "She's with me. We'll be participating together." Ingeol was visibly confused. His sister, Jiang Ina, stepped forward and asked Legion, "Do you even know who you're talking to?" Legion, unconcerned, replied, "No, do you know who I am?" Ina smirked. "Of course not." Legion leaned back, his eyes steady. When people face the unknown, they react in one of two ways: either they dismiss it, or they fear it. "You're doing both. You're dismissing me because you don't know me, while hoping I'm afraid of Ingeol." Ina smiled, clearly intrigued. "I'm not sure," she replied coyly. Ingeol, enraged, growled, "You've got some nerve." Legion shrugged. "Of course I have nerve. I eat well, and they say people who eat well speak well, too." He composed himself, straightened his clothes, and turned to Cherian. "We'll meet again at the Dragon and Phoenix tournament," he said before storming out of the room. As he left, Ina paused, giving Legion a lingering smile. "I'll see you again," she said softly. Once the room fell silent, Cherian thought to herself, "I'm in big trouble now." Considering Ingeol's temper, our protagonist is in danger too. Legion, completely unfazed, told her, "Well, I guess it's decided. We'll participate in the tournament together." Cherian, confused, asked, "Weren't you planning on entering anyway?" Legion nodded. "Yeah, but I'll have to revise my plan." Cherian's eyes widened. "Don't tell me you were talking about the Heavenly Dragon tournament when you said you wanted to participate." Legion confirmed with a casual yes. Stunned, Cherian asked, "Why didn't you fight back when you were insulted earlier, especially with your incredible martial skills?" Legion looked at her seriously and replied, "I don't beat up kids." Cherian was speechless, thinking he was making excuses. But when she saw the sincerity in his eyes, she was unexpectedly moved by his words. It seemed like he was telling the truth. Outside the inn, Ingeol's companions followed him, trying to console him. Another added, "It doesn't look like she's planning to win at all," rejecting young Master Ingeol and joining that laughable guy. Ingeol, however, didn't see Legion as laughable. The blade he had struggled with earlier was not something to be taken lightly. It was the first time Ingeol had seen him, and he couldn't help but wonder who exactly Legion was. Thinking to himself, "That arrogant woman, how dare she reject me? I'll make sure both of them regret this." With that, Ingeol left the scene, anger simmering within him. Meanwhile, inside the Righteous Sword sect, Huion was furious as she spoke with her mother. Cherian rejected young Master Ingeol's offer without a second thought. I've heard Ingeol is causing chaos at a brothel because he's upset. Her mother, Suei, the matriarch of the sect, replied, I was already worried. The rumors surrounding young Master Ingeol aren't good. As they argued, Zhang Lichu, the leader of the righteous sword sect, reflected silently, my wife and daughters are suffering because of my failures. If only I had mastered the Crimson Death Sword art, our sect would have been powerful enough to avoid this. Huiyan turned back to her mother. If Cherian really did reject Ingeol, then we have a serious problem. Cherian entered the room. There's no need to look for me, she said. It's true. Her parents, relieved to see her safe, had no idea who was standing behind her. Cherian introduced Legion, shyly announcing, this is the one I'll be participating with in the Dragon and Phoenix tournament. Everyone was stunned by her words. Legion stepped forward politely and introduced himself. My name is Legion. After his introduction, he noticed a porcelain vase on display and asked, is that from the Fujian region? How much did you pay for it? The sect leader replied, it cost 150 nang. Legion shook his head, smiling. What a shame. If I had been there, I would have only paid 120 nang. The sect leader was still trying to wrap his mind around the fact that Cherian would be entering the tournament with this stranger. Even Huiyan couldn't believe it. Then, turning to Legion, she asked, which sect do you belong to? Legion casually placed the porcelain back on the table. I don't belong to any sect, he replied. My parents sell fruit near the human gate. The room fell silent in shock. His parents sell fruit, Huiyan thought, incredulous. The sect leader, trying to understand, looked at the weapons Legion carried. You're carrying both a sword and a blade. Have you mastered both arts? He asked, though inwardly he thought mastering both the sword and blade is something only a third-rate thug would do. He must be carrying them for appearances. Legion's response shattered his assumptions. Yes, I've mastered both. Surprised, the sect leader pressed on, who taught you martial arts? Your parents, who sell fruit. Legion nodded. Yes. Huiyan quickly approached Cherian, whispering urgently, you need to apologize to young Master Ingeol first thing tomorrow. You can't seriously expect to fight alongside someone who learned martial arts from his parents, fruit sellers. Later that night, Cherian walked along a quiet path, her mind racing. I brought Legion home to keep him safe from Ingeol. Can't sleep, she asked cautiously. Replied, I find it hard to sleep when I change locations. Besides, there's something I need to take care of tonight. I'm sending a few people to the afterlife. Cherian couldn't tell if he was joking or not. His calm tone while saying something so brutal unsettled her. Cherian then asked Legion what kind of people his parents were, mentioning that she had heard his mother was beautiful. Curious, she asked what his father was like. Legion paused for a moment, reflecting, and told her that his father was someone who tried to handle everything by strictly adhering to rules. While that wasn't necessarily a bad thing, his father's insistence on imposing those rules on him had been a source of frustration. More than that, his parents were strongly opposed to him entering the Jianghu, especially his father. Cherian mused to herself, it makes sense. His parents aren't part of the Jianghu, so they must be concerned for their son's safety. However, she was taken aback when Legion added that his parents weren't just worried about him, they were concerned for the Jianghu itself. She misunderstood his meaning, thinking his parents were merely worried about him, just as her own parents had been anxious for her. Changing the subject, Legion smiled and remarked that he felt like he had already digested his dinner since it only consisted of vegetables. With a playful tone, he asked if they would be serving meat dishes tomorrow. Cherian, amused, told him to stop saying such silly things and that he should leave after breakfast the next morning. Legion, however, looked at her and asked if she was worried about him. Flustered by the question, she quickly turned away, responding that she wasn't concerned about him but about the people he would encounter in the future. Meanwhile, at the front of a building shrouded in red mist, 4 thugs gathered around a fire. One of them was speaking grimly about a young man who had trembled while holding a sword, seeking revenge for his father. I couldn't just ignore him, the thug said with a mocking grin. I had no choice but to send him to his father's side. The group burst into laughter. Another thug chimed in, joking that by killing the boy, they had spared him from becoming an orphan. Their laughter was interrupted when Legion approached. Surprised, they asked who he was and if he even realized where he was standing. Legion calmly replied that he knew he was at the Dark Hub, a place notorious as the Wandering Market. The men laughed at his audacity. So, you know what kind of place this is, and you still came," one of them jeered. Another added, "The world's gotten soft. Even kids are wandering around here now." But Legion, unfazed, spoke in a serious tone, warning them that if they called him a kid again, they wouldn't live to see another day. The thug, stunned by Legion's boldness, unsheathed his sword, growling that he had been taking it easy on him because he was just a little kid. But now, his patience had run out. With a roar, the man charged at Legion, intending to kill him. Before the blade could reach him, Legion activated a technique, releasing energy from his palm. In an instant, no one could quite grasp what had happened. One of the other thugs, confused, mocked the attacker, asking if he had been beaten by a child. But to their shock, the man collapsed, dead. Legion looked at the group and said, "Today is the day I take my first step toward the future. I had no choice but to steel my resolve, as this moment is vital for me." Angered and bewildered, the remaining thugs drew their swords. They couldn't comprehend what nonsense he was spouting. Gak, one of the men, charged forward, sneering, "If this day is so important to you, then I guess even those you'd normally spare have to die today." With one swift slash, Legion severed their limbs, cutting through legs, arms, and hands as easily as one would slice paper. The carnage continued. From the bottom floor to the top, Legion cut down everyone in his path, leaving corpses strewn across the building. When he finally reached the top floor, he kicked open the door to reveal a corpulent man surrounded by women who were massaging and fanning him. The man, known as the Gluttonous Emperor, leader of the Dark Hub, looked unfazed by Legion's entrance. The maids smiled seductively as they sensed Legion's presence. Legion noted the seductive atmosphere and commented, "Quite the ambience you've got here." The Gluttonous Emperor slammed his hand onto his chair, demanding to know if Legion was a guest and who he was there to purchase. With a smirk, the Emperor asked, "Who do you think you can afford in a place like this?" Legion, without hesitation, replied, "I'm here to buy the most expensive person in the room." The Gluttonous Emperor burst out laughing at the audacity of the statement. "How could a wet-behind-the-ears brat like you afford me?" he mocked. Playing along, he asked if Legion had enough money to cover the cost, then set a price of 500,000 yang. Without a second thought, Legion dropped 500,000 yang on the floor and asked, "Is the deal sealed?" The Emperor, who had assumed Legion was bluffing, was caught off guard by the amount of money he had brought. Noticing more in the bag, he asked if Legion could still afford to pay if he raised the price. Legion coolly responded, "I'd be disappointed if you did." Irritated, the Emperor's expression darkened. "What if I kill you and take your money instead?" he growled. Legion, unfazed, stared back and replied, "Then I'd be even more disappointed." The Emperor sent his maids forward, deciding he would indeed disappoint Legion by killing him. The women began releasing a seductive aura, their charm technique so powerful that no ordinary man could withstand it. The Gluttonous Emperor thought to himself that Legion had been doomed the moment he entered the room. The maid's technique, the illusory blissful dance, was an unparalleled art of sorcery that could paralyze a man's reason. However, just as they prepared to strike, Legion effortlessly blocked their attack with his hand. "A fine dance," he commented, "but not good enough to kill me." Taking a hairpin from one of the maids, he flicked it into a pillar, breaking the lamp above the Emperor's head. The Gluttonous Emperor, now visibly shocked, realized that Legion had seen through their soul manipulation sorcery in an instant. The maids, stunned, could hardly believe their eyes as their enchantment was broken. Legion turned to them and asked if any of them genuinely liked the Emperor. The silence was answer enough. Realizing they had been forced into service, Legion told them to leave and assured them not to worry about the consequences. The women hesitated, fearful of leaving in front of their master, but Legion urged them to muster their courage and live freely afterward. The Emperor, laughing darkly, interrupted, calling Legion's speech impressive but warning him that he would only be allowed to leave after having his limbs cut off. Even Legion was momentarily taken aback by the Emperor's cruelty. For the first time, his expression darkened with anger. Stepping forward, Legion warned, "If you really plan to have their limbs cut off, then I'll repay you by slicing you apart, piece by piece." The fatty was taken aback and stunned by Legion's deadly words. At that moment, the Gluttonous Emperor could feel Legion's unfathomable murderous intent, but to his surprise, he heard the maids thanking Legion. They expressed their gratitude, saying that just as he had told them, they would muster the courage to leave. They also promised never to forget his kindness, especially after he had given them a large sum of money. Legion, with a calm demeanor, told them not to worry and to live well, reminding them that they would need it for a fresh start. Meanwhile, the emperor stood frozen, speechless as he watched the women escape, unable to stop them. Furious, he thought to himself that he, the great gluttonous emperor, was reduced to this pitiful state by a sleazy brat's murderous aura. Seething with anger, he performed a technique that enlarged his body to 3 times its size, announcing that he would kill Legion with his special technique, the body protection art. Legion, undeterred, replied with confidence, "You'll need to endure quite a beating if you plan on growing even bigger." And with that, their battle began. The emperor lunged, but Legion swiftly dodged and immediately moved behind him. The emperor, seeing this, swung his hand with all his might, trying to strike Legion down. But Legion dodged effortlessly midair, a smile on his face, which only enraged the emperor further. Angry that Legion kept evading his attacks, the emperor was determined to turn him to dust. But while still airborne, Legion taunted him, saying, "I despise scum like you." With a single, powerful kick to the emperor's chest, he sent the massive man flying through several doors, breaking them in the process. The emperor coughed up blood but quickly stood back up, summoning energy to his hand, intending to kill Legion. But before he could attack, Legion spat in disgust, saying, "You filthy pig, keeping those women imprisoned." He flicked a stone with incredible speed and force, piercing through the emperor's hand and completely shattering it. The emperor, unable to believe what had just happened, stumbled to his knees, realizing he was the Goliath brought down by David's stone. Recognizing that the young man before him was a true master, the emperor refused to accept defeat. He gathered all his remaining energy, shrinking in size but doubling in power. However, before he could make a move, Legion appeared in front of him in a blur, his hand brimming with energy. With a single blow, Legion struck the emperor in the stomach, sending energy ripping through the man's body and destroying everything in its path. Finally, the giant was brought to his knees. Legion calmly told the emperor, "I paid for your life, so I'm taking you with me." The emperor, now on the brink of death, weakly asked where Legion was planning to take his dying body. Legion replied, "I think you misunderstand. I wasn't talking to you." The emperor let out a bitter laugh, saying there was nothing he could do now, adding that if it had been someone like Legion, he could have stolen away without confrontation. So, he asked, "Why bother confronting me?" Legion's response was cold and straightforward, "I needed a reason to kill you." The emperor laughed bitterly again, admitting that Legion was indeed a worse man than he was. Legion acknowledged this, saying, "Perhaps. But good people never fall into my trap." And with that, the gluttonous emperor died. For a moment, there was silence. Then, Legion turned to the hunchbacked man standing nearby and said, "We finally meet, Manor Master Hua. Or should I call you by your real name, Mushao?" Realizing that Legion truly knew his identity, the hunchbacked man stopped pretending. The man, Mushao, was the former patriarch of Mount Tai's Phantom Manor. Legion remarked, "Who would have thought that a genius in formation arts and engineering would end up in a place like this? It took me quite a while to find you. I suppose it's difficult to recover from that incident." Mushao, taken aback, was rendered speechless by Legion's words. The so-called incident referred to the tragic event that haunted Mushao's past. Years ago, Mount Tai's Phantom Manor had been renowned for having the finest mechanical techniques. Mushao, hailing from a prestigious family and possessing extraordinary talent, had nothing to envy until his only daughter tampered with an unfinished device. The resulting catastrophe killed his entire family, including his daughter. Overcome with guilt, Mushao changed his appearance and went into hiding, blaming his own carelessness. With tears streaming down his face, Mushao told Legion that there was no way he could ever forget that tragedy. However, to his astonishment, Legion told him, "You've been a good man, suffering for 10 years. It's rare to find someone who willingly endures so much pain out of sorrow for their family." Mushao was deeply moved by Legion's words. He thought to himself that no one had ever spoken to him like this before, no one had ever risked their life to try and save him, a man they had just met. Finally, Mushao asked, "What are you planning to do with me after you've bought me?" Legion, filled with conviction, responded, "I'll use you to dominate the Jianghu." Mushao was speechless at first, then he laughed and knelt before Legion, accepting his new fate. He swore on his name to serve Li Jun as his master and devote the rest of his life to him. Li Jun smiled and asked, "Shall we get started?" Mu Xiao, still confused, had no idea what Li Jun meant. Then, with a wicked grin, Li Jun activated fire in both hands. At the same time, outside the building, someone landed gracefully on a tree branch under the moon, wondering if the young master was still in battle. Minutes later, Mu Xiao's body returned to its normal state. He was utterly shocked, as it was widely believed that a body altered by the Great Law could never revert to its original form. Overcome with surprise and gratitude, he sincerely thanked Li Jun. Li Jun, smiling kindly, told him not to offer such deep thanks yet. He reminded Mu Xiao that from this point forward, he would have to work hard, so he shouldn't be too thankful just yet. As they spoke, another man approached. With admiration in his eyes, he greeted them, saying, "You've finally done it, young master." This man was Myeon, Li Jun's personal guard. Seeing him, Li Jun couldn't resist making a sarcastic remark. "Myeon, you should really shave. You're starting to look older than you are," he teased, his words like arrows piercing Myeong's heart, causing him to jokingly cough up blood. Li Jun introduced Myeong to Mu Xiao, explaining that Myeong was his trusted guard and would be responsible for guiding Mu Xiao through everything from this point forward. However, Li Jun then announced a sudden change of plans. He mentioned that their mission would now begin with the Jeonseon clan. Shocked by this, Myeong immediately asked Li Jun why he had changed his mind. "You once said the Jeonseon clan wasn't worth the effort. What's changed? And why are you suddenly entering the Dragon and Phoenix tournament?" With a casual tone, Li Jun replied, "People's minds can change at any time." Mang wasn't convinced and countered, "That's exactly the kind of excuse a playboy would give." Li Jun was momentarily speechless but then grinned, accusing Mang of being jealous of his popularity. Mang quickly denied it, saying, "Just because you have a bunch of women chasing after you doesn't mean you're lucky in love. True fortune lies in marrying the right woman." Still smiling playfully, Li Jun teased, "You're clearly extremely jealous." Meanwhile, Mu Xiao stood nearby, utterly bewildered by the exchange between the two, having no clue what was going on. The scene shifts to morning at the Jeonseon clan. Cherian and her father, Li Chu, had come to meet the young master, Ingeol. However, the guards at the gate informed them that both the union leader and the young master were currently away. Li Chu politely inquired when they might return, but the guard shrugged, saying they didn't know either. Quietly muttering to himself, Li Chu said, "We need to apologize before things get worse." He then asked the guards to pass along a message when the leaders returned, stating that they had come to pay a visit. As they were about to leave, a man stepped out. His name was Quan Hyeki, famously known as the Eight Flying Hands due to his martial arts prowess. With a broad grin, Hyeki greeted Li Chu, saying that he was on his way to the clan under invitation from the union leader but was pleasantly surprised to see someone he recognized. Li Chu returned the greeting politely, while inwardly thinking that the Jeonseon clan leader was certainly selective with his invitations, surrounding himself with skilled individuals. Hyeki, still smiling, suggested that since they both had some free time, they should grab a drink. He even offered to cover the bill. Little did Li Chu know, Ingeol was watching them from inside with a sinister smile. Later, they arrived at the Spring Breeze Inn. Hyeki poured a drink into Li Chu's cup, urging him to try it. Proudly, Hyeki said, "This is bear bile wine, very rare and hard to obtain." Li Chu, wanting to remain polite, thanked him for the opportunity to taste such a precious drink. During their conversation, Hyeki casually mentioned, "By the way, it seems like the Jeonseon clan leader is pretty upset." Li Chu quickly responded, asking Hyeki to put in a good word for them if he had the chance. Hyeki laughed and reassured him not to worry too much, downplaying the situation, "Kids get into fights all the time." Meanwhile, Cherian was lost in thought, recalling how she had prepared food for Li Jun the previous night. She had gone to deliver it, only to be told by a maid that Li Jun had left without a word. Annoyed, she grumbled to herself, "He was whining about wanting meat and food, but he just up and leaves. I bet he's gone by now." Back at the inn, Li Chu thanked Hyeki for the meal, saying he had enjoyed the evening and appreciated the fine wine. Just as Li Chu was about to offer to treat Hyeki next time, Hyeki suddenly acted surprised, making a flimsy excuse about forgetting something urgent. Before anyone could react, Hyeki bolted out the door without paying the bill. The inn's attendant, unsurprised, handed the bill to Li Chu instead. Upon seeing it, Li Chu was shocked. Just one bottle of wine had cost 120 non, and the side dishes were outrageously priced. He sighed deeply and told the attendant that he didn't have the money at the moment but would return the next day to pay. However, the woman boldly replied, "We don't accept credit, but given your situation, we won't overlook it either. So, until you bring the money, your daughter can stay here." Li Chu, frustrated and angry, demanded, "Are you really going to hold my daughter hostage?" The woman coolly responded, "Think of it as collateral. If you can't pay, your daughter can entertain guests during her stay." Li Chu was left speechless, wondering if the woman had lost her mind. It became clear to him that this wasn't just any ordinary winehouse. Moreover, he noticed the guards in the inn had an intimidating aura, stronger than he had realized, perhaps even stronger than him. At that moment, someone entered the inn. It was Legion, holding a bottle of wine. Surprised, Cherian asked, "What are you doing here?" Grinning, Legion replied, "Of course, I'm here to drink." He placed the bottle on the table and casually told the attendant, "The wine tastes a bit off. Did you mix something into it?" The attendant, trying to remain composed, asked him to explain. Legion, in a calm tone, said, "I heard big shots come here quite often. Do you also serve fake wine to them?" The attendant, now nervous, tried to maintain her composure. "You're clearly drunk. Please lower your voice. You don't want to cause a scene here." But Legion smirked and loudly declared, "The bear bile wine you're serving is fake." His words quickly drew a crowd, curious about the commotion. Confidently, Legion continued, "If I can prove the wine is fake, I'll take everything this place has earned today. And if I'm wrong, you can brew liquor from my gallbladder." The crowd followed him as he led them to a small, rundown house behind the inn, much to their surprise. No one had expected the place to have a backyard. Some murmured, wondering what proof Legion could possibly have. Standing before the locked door, Legion asked, "Doesn't it seem strange to you all that they store wine so far away in a hidden place, even chaining the doors with iron locks?" The attendant tried to argue, claiming they stored trade secrets there, not wine. But before she could finish, Legion shattered the door with his bare hands. He pulled out a large jar of wine and set it on the ground for everyone to see. With a smug look, he announced, "This is the true identity of the precious wine you've been drinking." The attendant, panicking, muttered to herself, "I must stop him. I can't let the crowd see what's inside." Desperate, she decided there was no choice but to kill him. She pulled out a thin, sharp needle from her mouth and, without hesitation, fired it at Legion, hoping to end the situation before it escalated further. However, Legion had already sensed the attack. With quick reflexes, he raised the wine jar in front of him, using it as a shield. The needle struck the jar, shattering it into countless pieces. To everyone's shock and horror, as the wine spilled out, insects began to fall from it, small, strange-looking bugs writhing in the liquid. With a sly smile, Legion looked around at the crowd and mockingly asked, "So, does anyone want to try it?" Legion held up a small cup of wine and asked, "Does anyone want to try it?" However, the crowd, having already seen what was in the wine, grimaced in disgust. "I'm good," several responded, clearly repelled. Others cautiously peered into their own cups, horrified by what they saw. "How can I prove it if no one tries it?" Legion exclaimed, causing a small commotion. He was fully committed to his offer when someone from the back shouted, "Stop it, you lunatic. I've never heard of this, making beer bile wine with such insects." Unfazed, Legion brought the insect close to his face, explaining, "This insect is called the black-painted insect. It's named that way because its back resembles a piece of art." The man who had called him a lunatic asked, "So what about it?" Legion smirked. "The black-painted insect tastes almost like beer bile, especially its excretions. It's so similar that no one with an ordinary sense of taste would notice." Upon hearing that they'd been drinking the insect's excretions, everyone became even more distressed. Suddenly, a man of grand stature interrupted. "How do you know that?" His presence shocked even Madam, and we learned this was Elder Y, the leader of the Southern Peak Alliance. After the conclusion of the 13-year-long Great Orthodox Demonic War, which saw heavy losses, the 9 great sects and the 4 great families sealed their doors, and the demonic cult retreated into seclusion. In the void left behind, for major forces rose to power in the Jianghu, with the Northern Heaven Supreme Family and the Southern Peak Alliance becoming the strongest. Seeing the others bow before him, it became clear that this ordinary-looking old man was one of the most powerful figures in the current martial world. Legion, too, seemed surprised by the reactions of those around him. Elder Y spoke again. "I've heard that the black-painted insect only lives in the south. How do you know about them?" His experienced face scrutinized Legion closely. Legion replied calmly, "I've wandered a lot since I was young." The old man's curiosity deepened. "Your knowledge is quite vast. Who are you?" Legion smiled. "I am Legion, eldest son of drifting clouds and flowing water." The old man muttered, "Drifting clouds and flowing water?" With a grin, Legion elaborated, "The best fruit merchants on the outskirts." The old man and his servants were visibly surprised. After a moment, the old man laughed heartily, saliva flying from his mouth. Is he intentionally hiding his identity? How impressive, he thought to himself. Meanwhile, Legion continued to tease Acharian with the insect. Behind the old man, his servant contemplated something. The Alliance leader is interested in this kid? How strange, the servant mused. We learned this servant was the White Tiger Squad leader of Southern Peak. A large man spoke up, "I'll try it if you want," turning to the old man, who nodded in agreement. The big man took a few sips of the wine, then turned to a woman with a disgusted expression and shouted, "Why, you blasted little! Wait, this is the same as what we drank earlier." His revelation caused an uproar, with others exclaiming, "What, did we really drink that? Please calm down. I'm being framed," the madam protested, trying to lie her way out of the situation. The crowd wasn't having it. "Bring us the real stuff, then, or give us your head." Her guards hesitated, thinking, the leader of the Southern Alliance and the White Tiger Squad are here. "We can't do anything." Madam, growing desperate, warned, "Do you know who's behind me? You'll all die if you mess with me." Amidst the chaos, Legion smiled. The sect leader turned to him and said, "Young master, if it weren't for you, we would have been in serious trouble." "Thank you," bowing his head in gratitude. Legion replied casually, "Of course. Who else would do something as awesome as this?" His nonchalant tone surprised the man further. Legion continued, "From now on, I'll be expecting to be treated as your savior." As the old man watched Legion, the big man remarked, "What an interesting person." The old man responded, "No, he's more than that." The big man was puzzled. "Pardon me?" A surge of energy rippled through the old man. From the moment I saw him, a feeling I had long forgotten rushed back, a combination of pleasure, excitement, desperateness, and ambition. It's stirring inside me, just like the day I conquered the Southern Peak Alliance. I have no idea why I feel this way. The big man, perplexed, thought to himself, the Alliance leader, with his insight, can see through just about anyone, but even he admits he doesn't know? Does that mean this guy is truly that special? Later that night, under the cover of darkness and as the wind howled through the forest, we saw a man running for his life, his clothes soaked in blood. "I must alert them at all costs," he muttered to himself, his face strained with desperation. As he ran, a shadow suddenly appeared beside him, causing him to instinctively reach for his sword. His pursuer had caught up. We learned that this bloodied man was a member of the Orthodox Alliance. After seeing the pursuer's badge, he recognized it immediately. The badge belonged to the Northern Heaven Supreme Family. "We don't have time," the pursuer said urgently. "We must cancel the Dragon and Phoenix tournament, and the Heavenly Dragon tournament. A group called the Flying Swallows Association is plotting a massive conspiracy. But this year's tournament is hosted by the Northern Heaven Supreme Family," the wounded man replied. "Why are you trying to reach the Orthodox Alliance instead of reporting this to your superiors? There's a spy among us. I can't trust anyone." Suddenly, they heard others flying toward them. "Damn it, they're chasing us. I'll become the bait. You must escape and deliver this message," the pursuer ordered. "You're the first person I've told." The wounded man, slightly relieved, said, "What a relief." But in an instant, the pursuer's face darkened. A smug grin appeared as he whispered, "You're mistaken." Before the wounded man could react, the pursuer sliced his head in half, blood splattering across the forest floor. As the head rolled away, the man spoke coldly, "The ones chasing us aren't from the Flying Swallows Association. They're from the Flying Swallowtail Association." Butterflies fluttered around as we noticed a woman's foot delicately perched on a small branch. A man kneeled before her and greeted her, saying, "The 16th butterfly greets the alliance leader." She responded, "What happened to the others?" The man replied, "The 14th butterfly has already taken care of them." With a fan in her hand, she smiled, a beautiful face twisted with a murderous gleam in her eyes. "I knew he would handle it," she said. She added, "The Dragon and Phoenix tournament will be a nightmare." In the same dark night, Legion and Cherian walked together, heading somewhere. "I'm looking forward to it," Legion remarked, referring to how tasty the meat would be that the second leader planned to buy. The leader had asked Legion if he liked meat, intending to buy the best to pay his respects. "I'm hungry just thinking about it," Legion mused. "You're always hungry," Cherian teased. "It's because I've been thinking a lot lately," he replied. "To conquer the world?" one of the girls asked. "That too," Legion responded, grinning. Then he added, "and other things." But suddenly, his expression darkened, his smile vanishing. Cherian wondered if he was feeling lonely, being in a foreign land. As they continued walking, she stopped and smiled broadly, thanking him for the help earlier. She mentioned that the young master of the family had tried to lift Legion's sword and had deliberately ordered the madam to provoke him. "To think I even considered entering the Dragon and Phoenix tournament with such a lunatic," she said. "That's why I'm telling you to enter with me." "I'll bring you victory," Legion replied. Cherian's eyes suddenly turned toward him, curious about what he meant. "Very well," she agreed. Legion smiled, too. "Winning might be difficult, but I at least want to put that man in his place," she added. The night sky and shining moon bathed the scene in pale light as both of them said in unison, "Let's do our best." "You don't have to, but if that's what you want," Legion said with a shrug. Then, sensing something, he added, "But first, we'll need to deal with that lunatic." Both of them turned their heads to see a man who had once run off after eating and drinking, leaving them to pay the bill. The man addressed them, "Are you the one who upset young Master Jang? My informant told me that some strange lunatic ruined everything." "He's talking about you, isn't he?" he sneered. Legion, unbothered, asked, "Do you always run backward to check on the targets you were supposed to kill?" Cherian was startled at the mention of killing. The man chuckled. "Yes, the order was to kill you. And that woman will be a problem too." His wide grin and murderous aura made Cherian's skin crawl. She whispered, "I can feel his murderous intent. He really means to kill us. Will we even be able to defeat him if we join forces? I've never actually fought anyone in real combat before." Her hands trembled as she gripped her sword. She asked Legion, "Do you have any experience in real combat?" Legion, now standing just behind her, pleaded, "Please, save me," hiding behind her as she broke into a cold sweat. We then learned that this man was a master of palm techniques. His skill was so refined that his hands seemed to multiply into 8, earning him the name 8 Flying Hands. He had once been a hero who dreamed of creating a better Jianghu, but seeing only villains prosper, he abandoned the distinction between good and evil, becoming a villain himself. Now, he stood ominously before Legion and Cherian. Cherian's body trembled as she realized she would have to face him. The gap in their skills and experience was as vast as heaven and earth. Sensing her fear, Legion leaned near her ear and whispered, "For now, draw your sword." "Yes," she responded, unsheathing her blade. "I can't just stand here and let this happen." She aimed her sword toward the man. The scene zoomed out to show the three of them in a tense standoff. The man smirked, "You seem eager to die first." He activated his palm techniques and lunged at Cherian, aiming to finish the fight quickly. Both Legion and Cherian dodged his attack, but Cherian was astounded by his speed. "I need to use my movement technique," she thought, but her body lost balance, causing her to crash into the root of a tree. She fell hard against the bark, and the man unleashed another palm attack toward her. She ducked to her knees just as he obliterated the tree with his strike. Fear washed over Cherian as she thought, "This is completely different from what I've practiced." The man's ominous gaze lingered in her mind, and she thought, "I'm really going to die." Legion, noticing her fear, calmly said, "Don't rely on your movement technique. Let your body flow, and the sword will flow with it." She heard his words and focused on her sword. "Your feet don't move the sword. The sword moves first, and your feet follow," Legion instructed. She concentrated, repeating to herself, "The sword first, then my feet." The man sneered at Legion. "Quite the talker for someone hiding behind a woman," he taunted. In that moment, Cherian, taking advantage of the distraction, attacked. But the man easily blocked her strike, barely breaking a sweat. Her eyes filled with desperation. If I fail now, we'll both die, she thought, launching attack after attack, each one stronger than the last. The man parried them effortlessly and mocked, "Do you really think these childish tricks will work on me?" He lunged for her face with one of his palms, but she ducked and retreated. Blood trickled from a wound on her shoulder. What should I do, she thought, panic rising. Something seemed off, and Legion pointed it out. Why is your swordplay so delicate when it's normally heavy? Cherian, confused, thought, the Crimson Death Sword art is known for its fluidity and variety. Is he saying that the way I've trained for over 10 years is wrong? Legion continued, you look like a turtle stuck on land when you should be moving like water. Cherian reflected on his words. I've been feeling like something's been off ever since I reached the 7-star level, as if I'm blocked by a wall. She wondered if Legion could be right about her sword technique. Could the Crimson Death Sword really be as fast as an arrow yet as slow as a turtle and as fluid as water? With determination, she thought, even so, I'll give it a try. Her feet moved gracefully, like trickles of water, as she flowed into a stance. She unleashed her sword, and with a single strike, a few strands of the man's hair were sliced cleanly in half. That's it, she thought, feeling a surge of confidence. The man, now agitated, gritted his teeth. Arrogant brat, he snarled, summoning more power into his palms and attacking with greater force. Cherian tried to block with her sword but was blown back, tumbling across the ground as her sword fell from her grip. Blood spurted from her mouth as she struggled to rise. The man loomed over her. I'll end this now, he declared ominously. We see the man's demonic eyes glowing, staring up at the sky, confused as Cherian suddenly vanishes. What the hell? Where did she go? He mutters, baffled. A voice speaks from behind him, that's it. He turns to find Legion in the air, holding Cherian like a master, bathed in moonlight, shining like a star. Legion reveals he's using a skill called Void. He says, it's the falling blossom step of the heavenly thunder steps. You probably don't know much about it, my father's martial arts, since they were rarely revealed. Your father's martial arts, the man trembles in disbelief, sinking to the ground. Legion sets Cherian gently near a tree and muses, my father and mother always said they fell in love at first sight. Honestly, I never believed in those kinds of things, but now I think I understand it a bit. Shaking, the man stammers, you mastered the reverse flow of wondrous movement? How could a kid learn such a martial art? With one swift strike, Legion crushes the man's skull. We see fragments of the man's teeth, skull, and nose shatter as he crashes through a tree, slamming hard into the ground. No way, the man gasps, coughing up blood. He realizes Legion is at a level far beyond his comprehension. Staring at the broken tree, the man begs for his life. Please, let me live. Legion coldly responds, do you know why I hate my father? If it were him, he would have told me to forgive you. He's really frustrating like that. The man, panicked, thinks, is he insane? Desperate to escape, he tries to flee. Legion continues, but my mother always told me never to live like that. Never to follow my father's ways. As Legion's true nature surfaces, he unsheathes his blade. Even if my father's path is the right way, he says, I will always follow my mother's path. The cloth wrapping his sword begins to tear away bit by bit, revealing the blade. The man, still fleeing, hears a terrifying sound like a ghost wailing. Legion unleashes his blade for the first time. Flames engulf his hands, and we see the demon's skull engraved on the blade's guard. The blade ignites with a bright, agonizing red glow. This is the Northern Hell Blade. Legion's eyes glow blood red as he wields the sword, swinging it with force. A demon emerges from his strike, and multiple souls lash out from a single slash. The man's face is frozen in terror as these demons lunge at him. It's a bloodbath, a scene of pure carnage and evil. Legion stares coldly as the man, already injured, realizes he's been cut into hundreds of pieces before he even understands what hit him. The man is dead, sliced apart in an instant. Legion, with bloodshot eyes, gazes at the lifeless body and says, my father's path is just too boring to follow. He begins to hum a tune, on a windswept cliff I stand and sing, of paths to take and what they will bring. No one hears my song out here, but a flower on the rocks lends an ear. At that moment, Cherian, who had been knocked out, opens her eyes. Legion notices and asks, "Are you awake?" Surprised, she realizes that Legion is giving her a piggyback ride. She asks him to put her down, but he insists on continuing since she's hurt. Cherian, still groggy, doesn't remember much. Legion explains how the man had no luck at all. "Who would have thought he'd be struck down by the sword you swung with your eyes closed? I just finished him off after he fell." Her face lights up in shock. "You stabbed him to death? Is he dead?" Legion, with a mischievous grin, tries to scare her. "Of course, is he immortal? How could he still be alive with his heart skewered into the ground?" Terror spreads across Cherian's face as she realizes that the man is dead, and she's partially responsible. Her trembling arms tighten around Legion's shoulders. He quietly reassures her, there's no need to make a fuss, he deserved to die. Besides, they say drawing a sword without the resolve to use it is an insult to the blade. Cherian remains hesitant. In her mind, Legion is still a mystery. He appears to be a carefree fool but occasionally reveals a much deeper, more dangerous side. As they continue walking, Legion grins and says, "This is just the beginning." The Dragon and Phoenix Tournament, the Heavenly Dragon Grand Tournament, conquering the world, he muses. Cherian, still on his back, glances over his shoulder, gazing at his face. Together, they walk toward a new path, their destinies intertwined. Meanwhile, on another part of the continent, two elderly figures and a middle-aged man engage in conversation. They hold harpoon-like tools, ominous auras radiating from their weapons. Although one tool looks ordinary, it emanates a powerful, yet opposite, energy, equal in intensity to the harpoons. Their sharp gazes focus on someone. "Did you buy it?" one of the old figures asks. The middle-aged man pulls out a wooden box containing 6 dumplings and hands it to them. One of the elderly women takes a bite of a dumpling, reflecting, "We will soon arrive at Wuhan." Sometimes, traveling slowly like this brings back memories of the old days. She shares a story with the middle-aged man, reminiscing about what a friend said to her 20 years ago. The old man, clearly uncomfortable, grumbles, "Are you bringing that up again?" He recalls the moment he drew his sword and lowered his voice dramatically. The memory of their battle plays out, showing both of them in action, looking fierce. The woman's face is shown ominously, adding a dramatic, almost traumatic, effect. After all, it's her memory. The old man grabs his hair in frustration. "That was so long ago. I was senseless back then, wasn't I?" The middle-aged man spits out his drink, and the trio bursts into hearty laughter. The middle-aged man then asks, "What did he mean by the young master?" We see her smile and say to the old man, "Oh, about that. I'm talking about Legion's father." Legion's father, if you didn't already catch on. The old man chuckles, "Ha, I can't believe Legion is already taking part in the Dragon Phoenix tournament. When did he grow up so fast?" "A lot of young kids are going to get hurt this time," he says, still laughing heartily. The middle-aged man adds, "Legion doesn't mess with kids unless they've done something to deserve a beating." The scene cuts to the man who had sent someone to kill Legion. His expression turns dark. He says, "That lunatic is still alive," referring to Legion. His servant confirms, "Indeed, sir. We've received word that he left the righteous sect with Cherian." The man's face contorts in disbelief. "What is that lunatic I hired even doing? He can't handle one single guy?" The servant praises the man, calling him a great warrior, before adding, "He hasn't returned since he left last night." Fear spreads across the man's face as he processes the news. His mind races. Where did the man disappear to? Could he be dead? Impossible, he thinks, then starts laughing out loud, shaking with disbelief. Legion couldn't have killed such a grand master. Could he? As he reflects, he recalls how Legion once saved his life. Whether it was luck or skill, he is determined to find out during the Dragon Phoenix tournament. The scene transitions to the day of the tournament. Firecrackers burst into the sky, filling the air with vibrant colors and loud sounds. Banners for the tournament and the family hosting the event line the streets. Guards are stationed at every corner. We see the grand arena, a massive pit where the tournament will take place. The participants, the dragons representing the male martial artists, and the phoenixes representing the female ones, begin to arrive. Spectators chatter excitedly about the various participants. A girl screams so loudly that it nearly bursts the eardrums of passers-by. She has spotted someone wearing a mesmerizing robe, the young master of the Northern Heaven Supreme family. His name is Hagi, and he's also the successor to his family. Accompanying him is the young lady from the renowned Sima clan. The crowd wonders aloud, have the four renowned great clans finally started to make their move? But just as the crowd's attention is focused on these figures, they notice yet another person, the young master of the Southern Peak Alliance, the one widely expected to win the Dragon Phoenix tournament. With him is the young miss, widely proclaimed to be the most beautiful woman in the land, the daughter of the Clean Water Mountain Manor. The crowd gushes about her beauty, rooting for the pair. Meanwhile, we see Legion casually raising his hand, as if thanking the crowd for their cheers. He speaks confidently, "Don't worry, I'll make sure to win." Though no one is actually cheering for him, he remains blissfully unaware, lost in his own thoughts. The crowd is astounded, wondering who this audacious man is. Someone shouts, "Who are you? Stop pretending to be someone important and get out of the way." Another person grumbles, "Who would have thought I'd envy his indifference?" Cherian comments, "They've decorated this place nicely. These Northern Heaven Supreme family brats must be making a lot of money, right?" She chuckles at Legion's light-hearted observations. She turns to him, softly saying his name. Legion glances over with a side-eye, and she flashes a beautiful smile, saying, "Let's do our best together." Legion smiles back, his face radiating adorableness, "Sure." As the 8 participating teams are called to comply with the referees, we hear someone say, "Don't touch anything, and just wait." As they head inside, Legion smirks, thinking, he's saying that as if he actually wants us to touch something. Cherian, confused, doesn't understand what Legion means. Inside the room, many people have gathered. The tension is palpable. "How many do you think will advance to the second gate?" someone asks. Cherian, still unsure, says, "What are we supposed to be doing here?" Legion simply looks around, and she repeats her question, "Are they going to ask us to go through the first gate?" Legion, lost in thought, is gazing at something. As the match begins and the signal is given, Cherian wonders what has caught his attention. Legion reads the sign and smirks, thinking to himself, "What do they mean by the tournament commencing the moment we enter?" He finally grasps the meaning and, with a smile, folds his hands behind his back. He guides Cherian toward a painting, asking, "Don't you feel something strange about this drawing?" "Something strange?" she asks, puzzled. We see the drawing he's talking about, a depiction of people locked in combat, wielding various weapons. Cherian stares at it, lost in thought. After a moment, she finally realizes the meaning behind it. In the painting, there are 18 figures, each holding one of the traditional Chinese martial arts weapons. Cherian starts to explain, "That means," but before she can finish, Legion cuts her off. "That doesn't mean anything. It's a trap to draw your attention to the 18 traditional weapons," he says. Her face flushes with embarrassment. "A trap? Then are you saying there are other hidden secrets?" Legion nods, "Take a closer look." Cherian examines the painting again, but at first, she sees nothing unusual. Then, her pupils widen. She notices something peculiar. While the figures seem to be fighting, they all have their eyes fixed on one thing, an incense burner held by the last figure in the painting. It radiates light in the middle of the battle. In the hall filled with people, there is indeed an incense burner placed on a table, just like the one in the painting. They were explicitly warned not to touch anything, under threat of disqualification. The examiners are watching. "Be careful not to touch anything, even by accident," Cherian warns as Legion's hand inches closer to the burner. With a loud noise, Legion grabs the incense burner. The room goes silent as everyone watches him, stunned. A man with a red sword glares at Legion as if he's an idiot. Legion lifts the incense burner and examines it from below. His actions confuse the onlookers, but Legion has discovered something. The words Dragon and Phoenix Hall are inscribed under the burner. Pointing to the inscription, Legion draws Cherian's attention. She asks, "Dragon and Phoenix Hall? What does that mean?" Legion replies, "It said the match starts upon entry, right? The first stage has begun." A trembling man behind them mutters something, as both Legion and Cherian prepare to move forward. Suddenly, a voice shouts, interrupting Legion, "Wait!" A man holding a red blade, accompanied by a young girl, points at Legion and Cherian. "Did you not hear the rules? You're not supposed to touch anything." His voice is filled with self-righteousness as if he owns the place. "We can't tolerate such reckless behavior here," he shouts, directing his anger at Legion. Legion, who has little patience for this kind of person, glances at him. The man continues his rant, claiming that Legion's actions could harm everyone. He lectures Legion and Cherian on proper conduct. Growing more irritated, the man yells, "Put that down at once." Legion, having dealt with people like this countless times before, sighs and calmly responds, "There's something gravely wrong with you." He takes a breath and adds, "Why does a young man like you only live by the rules?" Cherian, standing behind Legion, wonders to herself, "He looks like he's the same age as us." Legion tries to teach the man a different perspective, one where young people should challenge and reject the existing order. But the man refuses to listen, dismissing Legion's words as childish excuses. Still shouting, his anger rising, the man's spittle flies as he rambles on. He casts a sideways glance at the instructors, who are watching the scene unfold without a hint of emotion. A smug smile forms on the man's face. Perfect timing, he thinks. Subduing this idiot would leave a strong impression. "There's no rule that says I can't draw my sword," the man boasts as he pulls out his blade, threatening Legion. "Words won't sway me," he sneers. His companion, sensing the danger, tries to de-escalate the situation. But the arrogant man has already made up his mind. Assessing Legion, he says, "Don't worry, I'll just teach him a lesson." The man unsheathes his sword, but before he can make a move, a sudden force slams his sword back into its scabbard. It's Legion. Without giving the man any chance to react, Legion steps forward, calmly but powerfully. The man's eyes widen in terror. "That lunatic," he stammers, as Legion's presence overwhelms him. Legion's true, deadly personality begins to surface once again, his ominous smile creeping across his face. The same smile that heralded death and destruction just a short while ago. The man can't believe the sheer strength behind the slight movement of Legion's palm, his confidence crumbling in an instant. We see Legion coming even closer to the man's face, saying to him, "Let's not humiliate yourself and listen to your little sister." The man is now sweating relentlessly as he tries to speak. We get to know that he cannot move an inch because of the murderous intent put on him by Legion. As we observe this happening, everyone's attention is now allocated towards them. As we see his sister coming towards his wrist, we see her saying to her, "Big brother," about how he did while holding back. "You mustn't point your sword recklessly at the powerless." The man wonders who is the powerless here. We see her bowing her head and saying, "Excuse our rudeness towards Legion." Legion seems to be happy as he takes a breath, smiling. He puts down the incense burner on the table. As we see him calling Cherian to go with him, we see that even though the little girl didn't realize it, Cherian did indeed realize what happened, or at least a glimpse of. That distressed a bit as we observe the guard says to Legion, "You will be eliminated if you leave without permission." Legion, without any hesitation, says sure, seeing that other onlookers were surprised about how and why Legion is leaving on his own accord. We see Legion turning around, saying, "You may be pathetic, but I will give you a chance because of your little sister. If you want to advance to the second gate, follow me." Legion said as we look at the expressions on the face of both the brother and sister. The man grits his teeth, saying to Legion, "Didn't you hear that you will be eliminated as soon as you leave?" We see Legion getting out of the hall, just chuckling about it. As he leaves the building, we see other people gathered there looking towards them. Because we see all that happens, Legion and Cherian have finally arrived at the Dragon and Phoenix Hall. We see Cherian, who had some doubts, now say the Dragon and Phoenix Hall really do exist. Legion pulls the door, seeing that was a real difficult problem. How many participants would be here? We see Cherian thinking that there would be only 2 of them, as the problem was almost impossible to solve. She thinks that they will win, but as soon as the door opened, her expectation was crushed. As we see hundreds of pairs inside the hall. Seeing so many people gathered, we see that she cannot fathom the situation. She just takes a look around as we see Cherian asking about how these many people solved that riddle. Legion, who is taking a look around everywhere, sees people from high nobility. We see other nobles and even the successor young master of the Southern Peak. We see him saying to Cherian about how would the precious and prestigious Orthodox faction be called as one for nothing. She realized something, her pupils dilate even by thinking about it. She asks Legion if he is telling her that there is corruption involved. Legion is pointing towards the people, saying they must have only given the information to the prestigious clan. I can tell just by the faces that idiot is. Legion is pointing towards the person, the young master who tried to kill both of them, calling him an idiot. We see Cherian thinking to herself, that lunatic, as we see he is with her sister, himself judging by how the wench is looking at me with eyes wide open. Does she know something? Emotions show on his face as he looks toward him with murderous intent. We see the man realize something, thinking to himself something is wrong, is something backing him up, but that doesn't seem to be the case. Did the man I hired take the money and run away? As we see him looking at her sister, she is in a love daze looking towards Legion. He turns around, looks like he doesn't call himself popular without any proof. we see the man getting angry towards his sister, thinking about what this woman is doing with the drum. Commence everyone's attention, including Legion, and other people in the room turns towards someone. We see a particular person arriving and everyone is wondering who this man in the robe is, him announcing that all the dragon and phoenix is gathered here, congratulating them on clearing through the first gate. We get to know that this is Bongson. He is an elder in the Northern Heaven Supreme family and also in charge of this tournament. As we see everyone's expressions looking towards him, all of them are ignited with fire about how all of them have passed. We see even Charian is excited about how Legion was right and they passed. We see someone stop all this excitement, saying, "Please wait, you return now." We see the guards stopping those brother and sister who earlier had a scuffle with Legion. The guy with anger on his face saying this is unacceptable. The examiner's attention is piqued, and we see the disdainful look he directs toward the man, saying, "Unacceptable." The man, with an angry expression, retorts, "When we entered, the host specifically instructed us not to touch anything, word for word. We merely followed those instructions." He points toward Legion, saying, "In fact, these people broke the rules and should be disqualified." Behind him, a few others gather, voicing their agreement, saying the test is unfair and unacceptable. The word unacceptable is foreign to the Dragon and Phoenix Pavilion, but as everyone listens, the examiner, who had remained quiet until now, finally explodes, shouting, "Stop your whining." The harsh words resonate, reaching everyone's ears. With a scornful look, he continues, "Do you think the affairs of the Jianghu are a joke? You never know what might happen in Jianghu. You must always stay vigilant, always on guard. You were careless. You were told clearly that the match would begin the moment you stepped inside. If an assassin killed you, to whom would you complain? Would you cry out to the ruler of hell, Yama?" Legion's attention, momentarily diverted, shifts back to Charian, who asks him, "How did you know the incense burner was the clue? Was it just a coincidence?" Legion softly corrects her, saying, "There is no such thing as coincidence in the Jianghu." Charian reflects on his words, realizing that Jianghu is far more dangerous than she had initially thought. We see a young brother and sister, with the girl tearfully saying, "We only did as we were told." The stark disparity and cruelty of the situation seem even harsher than Charian initially imagined. She considers that if she were with anyone else but Legion, she might have faced a similar fate. The siblings console each other, deciding there's nothing more to do but go home. Meanwhile, the examiner grins, announcing, "You should be grateful to be eliminated today, because this Dragon and Phoenix tournament is about to turn into hell." As evening falls, Legion holds out a skewer of grilled meat to someone, saying, "Here, have a bite." We see someone's mouth eagerly sampling Legion's cooking. It's Charian's younger sister, delighted by the taste. "It's so delicious," she exclaims. "I know, right? Awesome, isn't it?" Legion replies, smiling brightly. He tells her, "It might be the same meat, but when I grill it, it's on another level." This girl, the third daughter of the clan leader and Charian's youngest sister, listens as Legion shares a bit about his family, mentioning how his mother is flawless in every way, except for her cooking. To avoid a cheap taste, he had to teach himself how to cook. "The joy of eating is one of life's greatest pleasures," he adds. Food, alcohol, and women, to be exact. Charian's sister is finally beginning to understand his philosophy. She admits his cooking surpasses even hers, despite her own skill. Charian notices her sister's liveliness and reminds her to chew properly. Her sister responds, "It just melts in my mouth before I can even chew." Charian has never seen her so lively before. We learn that her sister was always healthy until she fell mysteriously ill at the age of 7. Even the best physicians couldn't find a cause, let alone a cure. Charian wonders, will she ever recover? It only seems to worsen over time. The clan leader observes that while she usually struggles to eat even a spoonful, thanks to Legion, today has been wonderful. Grateful, he thanks Legion for also helping his daughter through the first round. Legion confidently assures him, "You can rely on me for the second round as well." The leader, surprised, reflects that in the past, he might have dismissed this as mere boasting, but now he sees that Legion is anything but ordinary. Who on earth are you, he wonders, as everyone else contemplates the same question. The evening deepens into night, and we see Legion walking over a flower-strewn field, seemingly both lost and focused. As he steps forward, a faint sensation catches his attention. The ground suddenly trembles, rocks flying up from beneath the surface, turning the once peaceful flower field into a harsh training ground fit for grandmasters. With a smile, Legion remarks, "This looks amazing." Behind him stand the Villa Master and his friend/servant, who notes that he has disabled the formation arts. The Master reveals that the formation was the 9 Palaces Extinguishing Flower Formation, the lightest of the 3 formations within the manor. The second is the 5th element and 7-star formation, and the last is the Celestial King of Light formation. Once activated, not even a martial master can escape without dismantling it. Legion nods, acknowledging, it's a formidable formation, no doubt. But, Villa Master, you're mistaken about one thing, there are martial arts that can break formations without dismantling them. The Villa Master looks on in astonishment as Legion adds, one day, you'll understand. The night darkens further as Legion's subordinate informs him that a new mechanism, called the 7-step path of the Grim Reaper, will soon be installed alongside 3 major buildings, whose construction is nearing completion. This is just one step closer to forming Jianggu's strongest sect, Legion says, glancing at his subordinate, who looks back with confidence. We've found the Wind God's location, just as you predicted. I will go to him tomorrow, the subordinate reports. But why all of a sudden? Legion asks. The subordinate replies, hinting, is there someone to whom you wish to offer it? Legion, catching his sarcasm, replies, that's a bad habit, asking when you already know the answer, testing the waters. Realizing his error, the subordinate apologizes, saying, I can't help it. We see them both standing peacefully, and Legion muses about how the night view always excites him, though he doesn't quite understand why. Is there some story I don't know about? Like me falling into a well when I was young and being trapped in darkness for a day or two? The man beside him replies, nothing like that ever happened. And even if it had, you would have crawled out on your own. Reflecting on his own childhood, Legion seems to harbor some self-loathing. He calls out the man's name, and the man responds, yes, young master? Gazing over the vast expanse of Jianggu, Legion asks, can I have the light all to myself? In the bustling streets of the marketplace, we see Legion and Cherian walking together as she asks where he's taking her. Legion only gives her a calm look, then tells her, I'm getting you a real weapon. A real weapon, she wonders. In the past, Legion noticed that she has poor taste in selecting weapons, choosing only based on appearance and price. He's even given her his own pocket money before, but now he's had enough of her whimsical choices. He says he's taking her to a reputable place, leaving her with a puzzled look. They arrive at their destination, where lanterns illuminate walls filled with various types of spears, showcasing different weapon handling styles. A stern-looking man in a blacksmith's robe stands nearby. Cherian senses the intimidating atmosphere, and as she looks around at the thousands of weapons on display, she realizes this place feels out of place for someone like her. She recalls that Legion once claimed he'd never been to Wuhan before, so how does he know about the Dark Arms Merchant? The Dark Arms Merchant is a secret establishment dealing in rare and dangerous weapons. As Legion scans the room, he says, is this all you've got here? The merchant scrutinizes Legion, noticing the unusual aura emanating from his blades. With a forced smile, he offers Legion something unique, a special item reserved for distinguished guests. He opens a box, and a frosty chill wafts out, introducing the weapon as the Frozen Jade Dagger. The dagger radiates energy and an aura that chills the room. Legion observes it intently, muttering something to himself, while Cherian gasps, it's so beautiful. Her awe is tempered by the price, a staggering 15,000. Her eyes widen as though she's seen a monster, not even death had frightened her this much before. Legion, trying to negotiate, asks, what can you throw in as a bonus if we buy this? Cherian is stunned by his question, a bonus? The merchant considers, then asks if there's anything Legion wants in particular. Casually, Legion asks if they can simply pick another item from the display. The merchant isn't fooled, he understands that Legion knows these aren't ordinary items. But he also thinks that Legion is quite an unusual person. It appears that the merchant agrees, as Legion smiles and gestures toward his choice. The merchant's eyes widen in surprise, realizing what Legion has just selected. Legion gazes somewhere unexpected, catching Cherian off guard. She wasn't anticipating this, and her surprise is clear on her face. Observing Legion's choice, the merchant lets out a laugh, then looks at Legion seriously and asks his name. Legion introduces himself as Legion. Although it's the first time the man has heard this name, he wonders if a young person like Legion could actually recognize such a unique item, hinting at an extraordinary background or perhaps unusual abilities. Could it be that those blades are? The merchant's thoughts trail off as he begins to grasp the caliber of Legion's weapons. A grin spreads across his face, and he thinks, looks like the true master of that weapon has finally arrived. The merchant then asks if he will see Legion again, to which Legion replies with a darkened look, since you were generous enough to add a bonus. Both men exchange grins, laughing as equals, though Cherian can't quite understand the moment. Later, Legion is seen washing something, while Cherian sees, outraged that he spent 15,000 on a dagger and then even asked for a gold glove as a bonus. She clutches her head, pulling at her hair as she mutters that Legion is either foolish or simply a madman, or both. With exasperated humor, she finally settles on calling him a crazy fool. Curious and concerned, she asks, "Where did you even get that much money? You didn't do something shady, did you?" and pokes him playfully. "Are you secretly the son of a rich family?" Legion, finally fed up, asks for her hand. She tries to refuse, saying she doesn't need a glove, but he explains that wearing it might help her improve in martial arts, especially since she's stuck at the 7-star level. Bewildered, she wonders how he knows her rank. Legion simply replies, "Is there anything about you I don't know?" Still skeptical, she asks if it will actually help, or if he's just teasing her. Legion reassures her, taking her hands in his own and advising, even the smallest object holds its own unique energy. Respect it and sense its presence. Mesmerized by Legion's words, she lets him place the glove on her hand. Suddenly, she notices the glove turning transparent and radiating a mysterious energy, strong enough to create gusts of wind. As the intensity grows, she asks, amazed, "What is this energy?" The glove begins absorbing the power surrounding it, casting a bright yellow glow that intensifies, enveloping her in a swirling wind. She is overwhelmed, realizing the gloves are far from ordinary. Legion, pleased, observes that the gloves have accepted her and remarks that she has talent after all. Cherian wonders aloud about the meaning of acceptance, glancing at her hand where the word wind is now inscribed. Breaking the silence, Legion explains that she should greet the wind god, noting that he possesses the second glove. He tells her that when they're near each other, the gloves will resonate. Though her internal energy is still weak, preventing the full effect, Legion assures her that the materials used to make the gloves are no ordinary ones. He goes on to explain that their original owner was the Wind God, the greatest martial master of Jianggu, over 300 years ago. In short, this is a treasure among treasures, he says. Perplexed, she wonders aloud why such a priceless item would be hidden in the Dark Arms merchant's collection. Legion shrugs, speculating that the merchant may have been waiting for someone who could recognize its true value. With these gloves, you'll even be able to block a sword with your bare hands. But given your current level, you'd still get hurt. At least, though, your hands won't get cut off. With sincere curiosity, she finally asks, "Why are you treating me so kindly?" Legion falls silent at her question, then smiles at her, his expression reminiscent of an old soul in a young body. Meanwhile, rain begins to fall upon the pavilion as preparations are underway for the Dragon and Phoenix tournament. The next day, Legion sits in a chair, with Cherian beside him, as she points to a long stone slab and asks about the footprints etched into it. The examiner announces the second round of this year's Dragon and Phoenix tournament, the test of striding. He explains that the task is simple, they must traverse from one end of the stone slab to the other, following two specific rules. First, they must step on the marked footprints, and second, each pair must assist and cooperate with each other. Some participants murmur that striding seems easy, convinced they'll have no issues. The young master of the southern peak loudly claims that anyone with martial arts training could do it, even calling it child's play. The examiner scoffs inwardly, thinking that this loudmouth, who is the Southern Peak Alliance's successor, is as pitiful as they come. Starting at this gate, there are no special privileges, he reflects. The examiners have no allegiance to any clan or sect, and they're not involved in the evaluations. Legion mutters, "This won't be easy." Cherian looks at him, surprised, as he explains that everyone has their own unique habits when it comes to martial arts, especially with something as intricate as striding. If you focus too much on each step, he says, your natural rhythm will be disrupted. And the challenge is even greater because it requires cooperation between two people. One participant wonders if everyone but the pairs will leave before the test begins, but the examiner clarifies that it will be conducted in front of everyone. The group realizes that going later might be advantageous, giving them a chance to observe and learn from the early participants' mistakes. Cherian hints at the value of observing others, even hoping to learn from any errors made by those who go first. Just then, someone accepts the challenge, and Cherian's pupils dilate as she looks in awe at the young master of the Northern Heaven Supreme family. As he steps forward, ready to begin, Legion watches with a grin, murmuring, "What a bold move, there's always value in going first." As the rain cloaked the pavilion, the scene transitioned to reveal the phoenix and the dragon, or rather, the successor of the Northern Heaven Supreme family, preparing for the second round. Spectators murmured in wonder, questioning the young challenger's confidence as the first to step forward. Yet, it seemed understandable, given his reputation. The young master, evidently well regarded, attracted all eyes. Legion and Cherian observed him intently, each contemplating the striding art he might employ. Legion appeared satisfied with the decision to advance quickly, casting a pleased glance toward the young man. Smiling, he asked his companion's thoughts, while Cherian prepared herself, planting her feet firmly on the engraved pavement. Their poised figures radiated energy, capturing the attention of all present. The crowd marveled at the display, every woman seemed entranced by the young master, and every man looked on in astonishment, some murmuring about his elegance. In mere seconds, with swift, deliberate steps, the young master moved forward. His composure and focus were unshakable, and as he approached the finish line, Cherian couldn't hide her admiration for his incredible speed. Legion, however, appeared slightly disappointed. Even the elderly murmured about his flawless technique, commending his swiftness and precision as befitting a successor of the Northern Heaven Supreme family. Meanwhile, the woman accompanying him struggled to keep pace but pressed on anxiously. The young master, seemingly unfazed, reached the finish with grace, landing lightly with both arms folded behind his back, as if it were mere child's play. The crowd erupted in applause, impressed by his feat, yet not everyone shared the excitement. A certain youth from the Southern Alliance appeared displeased, though the woman beside him seemed intrigued. As cheers rang out, Legion turned his attention to Cherian, who nervously asked, "For some reason, I'm anxious. Will we be able to pass?" Sincerely, she looked to him for reassurance. Legion smiled but answered with unexpected candor, "No." Taken aback, Legion stood, adjusting his blades. "Let's practice," he said, beckoning her to follow. "But aren't we watching anymore?" Cherian asked. Legion dismissed the idea, explaining, "It's obvious. Most will attempt to replicate his striding art and fail. This test is about finding your unique steps, not copying in others. We can't pass like that." His tone carried an unusual seriousness, his face unreadable. Under a rainy sky in a secluded courtyard, the pair arrived at a quiet spot devoid of prying eyes. "This is perfect," Legion remarked. He instructed Cherian to demonstrate the Scarlet Trace sword technique, promising to guide her. "However," he added, "you can't pass this test with just the 7-star realm proficiency of that technique." Cherian, baffled, looked at him in disbelief. "You're saying you can refine my technique after seeing it only once? Who are you? Are you already a master?" In the rain, with his blade and sword resting on his back, Legion smiled knowingly. "I'm good enough to teach you," he replied, his tone firm yet enigmatic. Cherian stood speechless, her thoughts swirling. After a pause, she drew her sword and said, "I don't know what you mean, but I'll give it a try." Raindrops glistened on her blade as she gracefully assumed her stances, showcasing her elegant art. Legion mirrored her movements, closely observing and matching her flow with precision as she wielded her sword with skill and determination. Legion observed Cherian closely as she executed her martial arts. His gaze lingered thoughtfully on her final stance before his expression softened with approval. "Wait," he said suddenly, startling Cherian. She paused, curious about his insight. "Try slowing that part down by half a breath," Legion instructed. Following his advice, Cherian adjusted her rhythm. Almost instantly, the aura surrounding her doubled in intensity. Her eyes widened in disbelief. She had only slowed her movement slightly, yet the sword's flow and energy felt entirely transformed. "Good," Legion said, nodding with satisfaction. "Keep going." His tone conveyed his pride in her progress. Minutes passed as Cherian demonstrated her refined technique, her blade cutting through the air with increased precision. "Bring your arms closer in," Legion corrected. His instructions came quickly but precisely. "Your left foot is out of place. Fix it. You're moving too fast there, slow it down." Every word from Legion seemed to refine her technique further. Each correction elevated her skill in ways she hadn't thought possible. Even Cherian began to recognize the profound impact of his guidance, realizing how invaluable his input was. As the rain finally ceased, Cherian's movements reflected in the water beneath her. Her martial arts radiated a completely different essence than before, almost unrecognizable from what she had practiced until now. Her final stance exuded grace and elegance, a testament to her transformation. Legion smiled as he observed her progress, proud of the results his guidance had achieved. Cherian, still holding her sword, trembled with disbelief. The technique she had just executed felt like a completely different art. "Is this the Scarlet Trace sword technique I knew?" she wondered, her gaze shifting toward Legion. The calm smile on his face only deepened her bewilderment. Legion congratulated her warmly. "Your Scarlet Trace sword technique has surpassed the 7-star realm and reached the 9-star realm." Cherian's pupils dilated as she stared at him in shock. Thoughts raced through her mind as she tried to comprehend the extent of his skill. Finally, she asked, her voice tinged with incredulity, "Is martial arts a joke to you?" In the midst of the relentless rain, deep within the forest, a lone figure stood. This was Legion's loyal servant and companion, his gaze cold and sharp, enhanced by his stolen eyes. His focus was fixed on a nearby pathway surrounded by towering trees. Moments later, 3 elders emerged from the shadows, a stern old woman and 2 men wearing caps. Their aura was dense and ominous, radiating a palpable tension. The man greeted them politely, his voice steady. "You've arrived. It's been a long time." The old woman responded with a faint smirk. "Indeed, it has." He continued, "The young master is participating in the Dragon and Phoenix tournament. Allow me to escort you to the competition hall." The woman, examining him closely, quipped, "Sure, but I see you haven't shaved. You look much older." Her comment hit the man like a piercing blow. One of the elder men added, "You look at least 5 years older," delivering another verbal strike. Visibly shaken, the man watched as the trio departed, their words leaving him metaphorically wounded. As they walked away, one of the elders murmured, "Why did he decide to participate in the Dragon and Phoenix tournament again? It seems like he's up to something strange." The group quickened their pace, eager to reach the hall. Meanwhile, in the grand hall of the Dragon and Phoenix tournament, an announcement echoed through the space, declaring the next challengers. The crowd turned in surprise, their attention fixed on Legion and Cherian. Whispers filled the room as people scrutinized their presence. Legion stepped forward confidently. "I am Legion from the drifting clouds and flowing water," he introduced himself. Cherian followed, introducing herself with equal poise. "I am Cherian from the Righteous Sword Pavilion." Murmurs rippled through the audience. "Drifting clouds and flowing water? Sounds like this lunatic doesn't belong to any clan," someone muttered skeptically. Legion turned to Cherian with a faint smile. "Since your Scarlet Trace sword technique has reached the 9-star realm, this should be easy, right?" Her eyes widened in disbelief. 9-star? After having my technique corrected earlier, it actually reached the 9-star realm? Legion chuckled. "That's what I heard, at least," he teased. Her confusion deepened as she stared at him. He grinned playfully. "Do you know the operation name for this challenge?" "Operation name," she repeated, puzzled. Without missing a beat, Legion leaped forward. "Operation Dragon and Phoenix shine together," he declared with enthusiasm. Halfway across the stage already, he turned back toward her with a bright smile. Cherian shook her head in amusement but followed closely behind. The rain had stopped, and under the clearing skies, the two moved gracefully along the stone pavement. The audience watched in awe, many breaking into a sweat as they tried to comprehend the elegance and speed of their movements. Legion glanced at Cherian mid-motion. "Pretty good, aren't you?" She smiled, her expression light and free. Thanks to someone, she replied, her gratitude clear. As she moved, Cherian felt an unfamiliar lightness in her body, as if she were dancing. For the first time, she marveled at her own agility, the newfound harmony between her body and mind. Legion, still in action, spoke to her with insight. The mind comprehends principles, and the body channels them into action. That's how you grasp the essence of martial arts. The essence of martial art, Cherian repeated in her thoughts. She landed smoothly, astonished by her newfound ease. Looking down at her feet, she realized they had already reached the end of the stage. Beside her, Legion had also finished with equal composure, a satisfied smile on his face as they stood victorious together. Cherian turned to Legion, her voice tinged with disbelief. I didn't even realize how I made it here. Legion simply smiled at her, his expression lighthearted. That was an impressive operation. Dragon and Phoenix shine together, he remarked with a grin. Cherian returned his smile, her features softening as his words sank in. The examiner's voice echoed through the hall, announcing their success. Legion and Cherian have passed the second round of the Dragon and Phoenix tournament. Outside, the streets buzzed with conversations. Everywhere, people discussed martial arts and the events of the tournament, the excitement evident in every word. Amid this lively atmosphere, Legion strode purposefully through the crowd, his expression focused. Soon, he arrived at a secluded area where the three elders awaited him. As his gaze met theirs, Legion's typically cold demeanor melted into a youthful smile. Stretching his arms wide, he exclaimed, "Grandmother!" His tone was filled with childlike warmth as he approached for a hug. Before he could reach her, a small blade flew toward him, grazing his forehead and drawing a trail of blood. The old woman sneered, "Disgusting lunatic. Anyone would think you were my real grandson." One of the elder men chuckled from behind. "You really do act like a brat." Their laughter filled the air, creating an oddly cheerful scene despite the tension. Legion wiped the blood from his forehead with an exaggerated pout. "It's been so long since we've seen each other, and this is how you greet me? You're too much." The old woman shook her head, her tone sharp but tinged with amusement. "You told me you're establishing a martial faction here. What exactly are you planning after stirring up such trouble?" Legion's playful smile shifted into one of cool determination. "What do you think?" he replied, his voice steady but cold. "I'm going to devour the Jongo Union." The old woman's expression turned serious. "Do you think uniting Jianghu is that simple? Beyond the 4 great alliances, what about the 9 great sects and the 4 major clans?" Her sharp gaze bore into him as she added gravely, "And what will you do about the divine cult?" The mention of the divine cult, a power equal to the demonic cult, caused the atmosphere to thicken. For a moment, even Legion's composure faltered. But then, his calmness returned. "I don't concern myself with what hasn't happened yet," he said nonchalantly. The tension eased as the elders sighed. The old woman muttered, "Who does this boy take after?" Legion instructed his companion and servant, "Escort them well." The servant hesitated before asking, "Where are you headed, young master?" With a sly smile, Legion replied, "To deal with an ugly lunatic." The scene shifted to a mesmerizing landscape of cliffs and valleys. Cherian's voice broke the quiet. "No way, you're joking, right?" Legion's grin widened. "Not at all. We're crossing that bridge." In front of them stretched a rickety, weathered structure, the life and death bridge, a perilous path suspended over a deep chasm. Cherian's face paled as fear gripped her. "I can't do it," she said, shaking her head. Legion's tone remained indifferent. "You'll regret it if you don't." As they approached the bridge, Legion explained that the lunatic he sought was connected to Cherian. Then, with casual ease, he stepped onto the bridge. "It's just like walking on flat land," he said, striding forward confidently. Cherian froze, horrified by the sight of him standing above the treacherous cliffs. "You could fall at any moment," she shouted. Legion turned to her, his expression calm. "That kind of thinking separates an expert from a novice. To an expert, this is no different from solid ground." His words struck a chord, and Cherian's pupils dilated in realization. Embarrassed but determined, she muttered, "I know that too." Legion smiled at her. "Then if you have the mindset of a martial master, wouldn't you give it a try?" His words resonated within her, and after a moment of hesitation, she stepped onto the bridge. Her heart raced, but she pushed forward, gripping the ropes tightly. Surprisingly, it wasn't as terrifying as she had imagined, though every step still carried weight. As she reached the middle of the bridge, where Legion stood waiting, he turned to her with a mischievous grin. "Oh, I forgot to mention, be careful of the wind. It might blow off an ear." Cherion's eyes widened in alarm as a powerful gust swept through the valley, transforming into a near tornado. The bridge swayed violently, and the wind howled around them. Legion stood unshaken, his figure steady amidst the chaos. Cherion, on the other hand, struggled to maintain her balance, gripping the ropes tighter as the wind whipped around her. In that moment, Legion's composed image seemed untouchable, while hers was surrounded by the fury of the storm. The wind surged violently from behind, barreling toward Cherion with an almost deliberate force. She turned to look, panic flashing in her eyes, just as the gust lifted her into the air. The bridge swayed violently beneath her, and her body hung suspended, her face frozen in shock, unable to process what was happening. Legion called out to her, his voice steady and commanding. "Don't be afraid. Just think of it as flat land, that's right," she thought, desperately trying to cling to his words. "This is no different from flat land." Yet, as her body hovered precariously above the chasm, the reality of her situation struck her harder than Legion's calm assurances could soothe. Her breath hitched, and she squeezed her eyes shut, convinced she was about to fall to her death. In that critical moment, Legion's pupils contracted sharply, his irises glowing an eerie crimson. A dark, purplish aura radiated around him as he summoned an energy unlike anything she'd ever seen. Shadows coiled and twisted around him, and with a fluid motion, he unleashed a powerful technique. The dark aura extended toward her, wrapping around her mid-air form like tendrils of shadow. Cherion stared in awe, her thoughts racing. What is this power? Slowly but surely, the shadowy aura cradled her and brought her safely back to the bridge. Her feet touched the swaying planks, but her entire body trembled as if the terror of the moment still clung to her. Looking down at the abyss below and the now quaking ropes, she felt as though the bridge itself had become a life-and-death challenge. Legion stood calmly in front of her, his expression unreadable. Overwhelmed by fear, her legs refused to move even an inch forward. Then, Legion's voice softened, his words cutting through her fear. "The first time I saw you," he began, his tone tender, "I thought my heart stopped beating." Her pupils widened, disbelief written all over her face. Wait, was that a confession? Legion extended his hand toward her and added, "Come to me, because I like you." Cherion's face flushed in surprise. Her thoughts spiraled. He likes me? Memories of every interaction with Legion flashed through her mind, his mysterious charm, the women always drawn to him, his time spent at her house, and how he had asked for her help. No way. Could this guy really like me? Unthinking, she stumbled forward in a daze, her motions stiff and robotic. By the time she reached the end of the bridge and stood on solid ground, her mind was still consumed by his words. She blinked, then thought to herself, did I hear that wrong? Legion's voice snapped her out of her reverie. You crossed in no time, didn't you? But Cherion wasn't paying attention to his comment. She was fixated on his earlier statement. What you said just now, was it true? She asked, her voice shy but urgent. Legion smiled, feigning innocence. What did I say? Blushing furiously, she pressed on. Did you say that to distract me because I was scared? Legion paused for a moment, a mischievous glint in his eye. As I thought, you're pretty clever, he said with a teasing smile. Realization dawned on Cherion, and her face turned red with a mix of frustration and embarrassment. You jerk, she shouted, punching the bridge in anger. How dare you toy with someone's feelings like that? As her fists rained down on the bridge, a voice suddenly interrupted. How dare you strike sacred ground? Cherion froze, startled by the booming voice. She turned to see a bald man approaching, his expression stern. Stop at once, he commanded. Realizing her mistake, she quickly bowed in apology. I'm sorry, she said earnestly. Legion turned his attention to the bald man, his eyes narrowing as he scrutinized him. The monk, noticing Legion's gaze, faltered, his stern demeanor crumbling. He let out a nervous laugh. "Ah, young people these days, carry on," he stammered, attempting to retreat. Legion's voice cut through his attempt to flee. "You've got quite a convincing disguise, haven't you?" The monk froze in his tracks as Legion's expression darkened, his eyes gleaming with a devilish intensity. "But you can't deceive my eyes, you ugly lunatic." The monk's face twisted in alarm as Legion confronted him, his presence radiating both power and menace. In front of a solemn Buddhist statue, a few sticks of incense burn steadily. A monk sits nearby, his hand resting on his head in distress. Addressing Legion and Cherian seated before him, he laments how Buddha can remain so indifferent. As he speaks, tears well in his eyes, and he begins tearing pieces off his mask in frustration, wondering aloud how such a monstrous individual could be sent to this place. The monster in question is none other than Legion. Cherian watches in curiosity and asks Legion about the masked man's identity. Legion nonchalantly describes him as a con artist, a quack, and a thief with 8 utterly useless skills to his name. He smirks as he speaks, while Cherian's surprise is evident. She is awestruck by the revelation of 8 distinct talents and begins to wonder if this man might be someone significant. Her pupils dilate as she realizes his true identity and exclaims in disbelief, identifying him as Unbounded Handsome. The monk, however, tears away the last remnants of his mask to reveal his real face, shocking everyone. It becomes clear that his true moniker is Unbounded Grotesquerie. Meanwhile, he observes the young women around him, muttering disdainfully about whether they understand the rules of the Jianghu. Suddenly, a hand smacks him on the head, courtesy of Legion, who chuckles and tells Cherian that this man is, in fact, his disciple. Cherian's expression morphs into shock, and she demands to know how this came to be. Legion explains with a grin that the monk lost a bet to him, and the terms were simple: the loser had to become the winner's disciple. Curious, she asks what kind of bet it was. Legion recounts how it began as a game of checkers, during which the monk accused Legion of using telepathy to cheat. From there, it escalated to a fraudulent duel and then a legitimate fight, all of which the monk lost. Fuming, the monk insists that Legion must have used underhanded tricks, perhaps even poison, to win. Cherian listens intently and muses to herself that poison and trickery are this man's specialties, yet Legion managed to best him even in those areas. With a sly smile, Legion announces he has a request. Acknowledging the monk's skill as a quack but a good one, he asks for help with a patient. The monk protests angrily, declaring that he doesn't just treat anyone. He reminds Legion that many wealthy individuals have perished because he refused to treat them recklessly. Unperturbed, Legion offers a deal: if the monk helps this patient, the terms of their bet will be nullified. The monk's eyes light up in surprise, and he stands upright with renewed energy, declaring, "All right, let's end this unpleasant connection once and for all." As they prepare to leave, Cherian nervously asks Legion who the patient is. Legion responds with a bright, reassuring smile but remains cryptic. Soon after, the truth dawns on Cherian: Legion's patient is none other than her younger sister. She watches as Unbounded Grotesquerie carefully examines her sister, who has been suffering from an undiagnosed and untreated condition for years. The monk focuses intently on his task, checking for signs of heart disease with a sharp, discerning eye. The sister, mesmerized by his skill, feels a spark of hope she hasn't experienced in years. Cherian observes silently, her emotions wavering between disappointment from past failures and cautious optimism. After a tense pause, Legion asks the monk about her sister's condition, speaking respectfully for once. With a serious expression, the monk declares that the child was stung by a venomous insect called the blood bee, a rare and deadly creature. The parents are visibly stunned upon hearing this revelation. The monk calmly explains that he will prescribe a medicinal brew to be taken for 15 days. Afterward, proper nutrition and regular exercise will help her regain her strength, and she should make a full recovery within a year. The simplicity of the treatment, coupled with its life-changing implications, leaves everyone in awe. The younger sister is captivated by the monk's brilliance, while her parents and Cherian are overwhelmed with relief. For the first time, they dare to hope for her survival. The sect leader, moved to tears, kneels before the monk, thanking him profusely and praising him as the great Unbounded Grotesquerie. The atmosphere is deeply emotional, especially for Cherian, who never dared to dream her sister could be saved. The mother turns to Legion with heartfelt gratitude, thanking him for bringing such a skilled individual to their aid and promising to repay his kindness. As everyone breathes a sigh of relief, the tension in the room dissipates, leaving behind an air of hope and newfound faith. Legion smiles warmly, saying, "You shouldn't think much of it, your daughter worked hard and even risked her life." Turning to her, Legion adds in a gentle tone, "It was all thanks to her," addressing everyone present. The eyes of the family fill with a mix of grief and gratitude as Legion congratulates Cherian, commending her for a job well done. Overcome with emotion, she cannot hold back her tears and softly says, "Thank you," her voice trembling. Legion simply smiles, watching her as she tries to gather herself. The scene radiates joy as the mother embraces her daughter, their bond evident in their expressions. Legion offers comforting words to everyone, while Baldy, true to his nature, revels in spreading his influence. After a short while, Legion clasps his hands together and says with a hint of humor, "I'm sorry about everything, Senior Unbounded. You've completed your part, and you can return now." Baldy smirks and replies, "Right you are. You're a straightforward guy, it's fun being around you. But, let's not pretend this is the only reason you came to me." His tone grows stern as he looks at Legion, waiting for an honest answer. Legion nods earnestly. "You're not wrong," he admits. "At first, I sought your help to conquer this world. But that child's life mattered more." Baldy looks at Legion thoughtfully. "So, even one child's life is precious to you, huh? 3 years ago, when you were just a reckless brat, you said something similar. You dreamed of creating a great Jianghu back then. I thought they were just the immature words of a child." Pausing, Baldy studies Legion carefully. "But it seems you've grown since then. Tell me, do you still hold on to that dream?" "Of course," Legion replies firmly. Baldy's gaze sharpens, almost as if peering into Legion's soul. "Then show me this great Jianghu you speak of. If you can, I'll help you." Legion's expression turns serious. "You'll have to risk your life for it. Are you sure you won't regret this?" Baldy smirks confidently. "I won't," Legion chuckles slightly. "Then be ready. You'll even have to call me young master." Baldy snorts. "That's better than calling you master. Besides, I'm curious about what you'll accomplish." "What's next on your agenda?" Baldy asks, his tone more casual. Legion's lips curl into a smile. "I've gained a new companion," he says with a glint in his eye. Time shifts to a different moment, a small island, where the third trial of the Dragon and Phoenix tournament is set to take place. A massive crowd of participants, including numerous dragons and phoenixes, has gathered here. All of them have successfully passed the second round, yet confusion lingers among the group. Cherian turns to Legion, remarking, "I didn't expect the third trial to take place on an island." Just then, the sharp voice of the instructor booms over the commotion, yelling for his guards. 3 figures are seen arguing loudly with a messenger-like figure nearby. Intrigued, Legion and Cherian glance toward the commotion. It turns out to be the successor of the Southern Peak Alliance, clearly agitated. "How does the instructor expect me to be left on this desolate island without my guards?" he shouts indignantly. The messenger attempts to calm him down, explaining, "The Southern Peak Alliance leader has already agreed to the fairness of this trial." Legion smirks, muttering, "Those immature guys never change." His words don't ease Cherian's concerns, as she worries aloud if they'll be safe in such a precarious situation. Legion reassures her, saying, "The experts from the Northern Heaven Supreme family, mentioned by the instructor, are surprisingly skilled." Cherian is astonished by Legion's ability to sense their presence. He adds, "Even so, we can't let our guard down," as a ship approaches the island. On board, a girl hides herself, her eyes wide with fear. Behind her, a plate shatters, and her terrified screams echo through the cabin. Outside the room, someone runs frantically, leaving behind a scene of chaos. In another part of the ship, an ugly pervert lounges on his bed, grumbling. Where did they find someone so half-assed looking? He sneers. He calls out to someone outside, "Hey, how much longer?" A man replies from beyond the door, "About 15 minutes until we arrive." Licking his lips, the pervert leers, "All right, let's see if the women of these so-called noble families are really any different." Of the young Bong, a beige-colored standard adorned with a dragon and phoenix emblem, shining brightly under golden roofs. A bald man named Yam Chong, the examiner for this stage, steps into view. His presence creates a buzz among the participants. "That's Yamchong," someone exclaims in awe. "A true hero," another murmurs, astonished that a master of his caliber is overseeing the third trial. Legion and Cherian observe the commotion. She turns to him and asks, "Is the third trial a flag capture battle? Do we have to fight for it?" Her question is logical, but Legion's response surprises her. "It's not exactly about fighting for the flag," he says cryptically. The scene shifts as Legion gestures toward two gates at the island's edge. "See those two entrances?" He begins. "If you enter through the left gate, you'll circle the island and come out through the right gate." In other words, this entire island is the third gateway. It means that they don't have to follow the path, they can just make one by themselves. The trial takes a surprising turn as the examiner announces, "If you want to continue the trial, the first 4 pairs to return here will each claim a young bang flag." The participants are stunned but quickly focus, realizing the gravity of the challenge. Only 8 individuals, 4 pairs in total, will succeed in claiming the coveted flags. As murmurs ripple through the group, a girl guesses, could it be a test of quick movement skills? Her speculation startles another girl, who hadn't been paying attention. The first girl smiles and introduces herself. She introduces herself as Jiango from the Yong clan, and the one alongside him is her senior brother, she says cheerfully. Her senior brother bows and greets the group. "Nice to meet you," he says, joining his hands together politely. Legion, ever observant, asks, "You're the lady from the Zhang Geometry clan, correct?" The official name of the Sword clan. Cherian looks startled that he knows this, but before she can respond, Jiango says, "My senior brother apparently saw you last time and fell for you." The senior brother, flustered, protests, "When did I ever?" "That's a misunderstanding, my lady." Their awkward exchange draws the attention of the examiner, who shouts, "Stop fooling around." Embarrassed, they all apologize, including Legion, who chuckles while watching the scene unfold. The examiner continues, "Having quick movement skills alone won't win you a young bang flag. This island is full of mechanical traps." Mechanical traps? The participants echo in alarm. The examiner nods. "Yes, but don't worry. The arrow tips are wooden, not sharp like real weapons. If you find yourself trapped and unable to proceed, call for the nearest instructor. They'll always be close by." The head instructor wishes them luck, and the trial begins. Legion and Cherian choose a path that no one else has ventured onto. As they walk, Cherian looks around at the unfamiliar scenery and comments, "No one else chose this path." Legion replies with a knowing smile, "Walking a path no one has taken before carries a deeper meaning." Curious, Cherian asks, "Did you really start traveling when you were 10? You must have been to so many places." Legion nods, "There are hardly any places I haven't been to." Hearing this, Cherian sighs with a dull expression. "That must be amazing." She reflects privately, thinking that all of Legion's surprising skills must stem from his vast experiences. Looking downcast, she mutters, "When I look at you, I feel like a frog in a well." Legion glances at her and responds warmly, "Don't worry. I'll take you to many places from now on." He smiles brightly, and the girl blushes at his words, her mind swirling with the promise. Just as she's about to say something, Legion interrupts, "Didn't they say the instructors would be everywhere?" Cherian pauses. "Why?" Legion's tone turns serious. "I can't sense anyone nearby." This revelation stuns her, and her face pales. "What?" she asks, her voice trembling slightly. They both stop walking, scanning their surroundings cautiously. The girl, trying to mask her unease, spins around and says nervously, "Why are you trying to scare me? Let's just keep going." She hastily quickens her pace, but Legion stays rooted, deep in thought. Suddenly, a rustling sound pierces the quiet. Cherian reacts instantly, unsheathing her blade and taking a defensive stance. In a flash, an object flies toward her. She blocks it with her sword, but the impact forces her to take several steps back. As the commotion settles, Cherian notices an arrow lying on the ground. "A trap mechanism," she murmurs, relieved. She turns to see Legion standing calmly, holding another arrow, the one that had been aimed at her back, caught in his bare hand. Her shock is evident. "Thank you," she says, deeply grateful. Legion examines the arrow and frowns. At this speed, even wooden arrows would be dangerous, but this isn't wooden. Cherian stares at him, confused. He flips the arrow to reveal its sharp, metallic tip. "This is a real arrow," he says gravely. Both realize someone has tampered with the traps. Before they can process this, a rattling sound and a scream echo through the air. Legion's expression hardens. "Let's check it out," he says, dashing toward the source of the noise. Cherian follows, her blade still drawn. Cherian doesn't lag behind and leaps into motion, closely following Legion. Meanwhile, the ship of the infamous lecherous demon arrives at the island's port. Two instructors stand near the dock, observing the vessel's unexpected arrival. One instructor furrows his brows. "Did anyone report a boat coming? It looks like some fool has wandered onto the Yongbang competition grounds." The other instructor shakes his head, but before he can respond, a strange fluid-like object comes hurtling through the air toward them. Upon closer inspection, it's not fluid, it's something swollen, bouncing erratically. Their eyes widen in horror as the grotesque realization hits, it's a severed head rolling across the ground. The lifeless gaze of their fellow instructor stares back at them, leaving them frozen in shock. From the shadows, a sinister voice echoes, drawing closer. "So, there were more instructors? I sent my subordinates to deal with them earlier, but it seems pests keep crawling out of nowhere." Emerging into view is the lecherous demon, blood smeared across his face and body, as if he had just feasted on something. His menacing aura causes fear to ripple through the air. One instructor, trembling, unsheathes his sword. "You go and inform the examiner right away," he shouts to his companion. The other instructor quickly turns to flee, but before he can take more than a step, a rattling chain weapon flies through the air, wrapping tightly around his neck. In an instant, the chain tears his head clean off, sending blood spraying in all directions. His lifeless body crumples to the ground, his head landing a few feet away. The surviving instructor stares in sheer terror. Before he can utter a word, the same chain lashes out again, slicing through the air. His words are cut short as the chain strikes, ending his life just as brutally as his companions. Blood stains the ground as the lecherous demon swings his weapon lazily, stepping over the bodies of the fallen instructors. "Well, the women are waiting," he mutters with a twisted grin. "Shall we proceed?" Elsewhere, Legion sprints toward the source of the scream he heard earlier, Cherian following closely behind. When they arrive, they find a group of participants gathered in the forest. The scene before them is grim. Someone is crying uncontrollably, while others have their hands over their faces, struggling to process the horror. Legion halts abruptly, startled by the grisly sight. Cherian peers over his shoulder, equally shocked. Among the group, a young woman is sobbing over her senior brother, whose fate is more brutal than anything seen before. His lifeless body is mutilated, barely recognizable, adding an even darker weight to the already grim atmosphere. The successor of the Southern Peak Alliance stands frozen in shock, unable to speak. Cherian approaches the grieving woman. "Lady," she begins, but her voice trails off as her own emotions threaten to overwhelm her. Legion scans the area, his sharp gaze catching something unusual. Embedded in a nearby tree is a long blade, its edge stained with fresh blood and gleaming like a razor. He moves closer, examining the weapon carefully. Amid the chaos, one man breaks down, his voice shaking. "I didn't sign up for this kind of competition." His panic is palpable. His partner, equally terrified, responds, "Forget the Yongbang flag, I just want to get off this island." Another participant begins yelling for an instructor, desperately calling for help. But no one comes. The realization sets in, the instructors are either dead or unable to respond. The entire group gathers around the mangled body, fear and uncertainty gripping them. Legion, deep in thought, remains silent, his expression unreadable. Cherian watches him intently, her worry growing. She finally approaches and asks, "What's wrong? Should we head back?" Legion's expression hardens, and his voice is firm. "We can't do that. This island has become a massive trap. If this is someone's deliberate plan, they've probably anticipated us trying to turn back. The strongest traps are likely set up near the return paths. If we stray from this path, we'll fall into a formation trap." The weight of his words sinks in as they realize they're surrounded, with no escape in sight. "What should we do?" Cherian asks, her voice tinged with fear. Legion doesn't hesitate. "We keep moving forward," he says resolutely, "no matter what." Amid the heightened tension, Legion and Cherian stand amongst the gathered crowd, their collective thoughts weighed down by the precarious situation. The group is acutely aware of the formation arrays embedded around them, compounding their unease. Cherian, turning toward Legion, questions, is there any method to dismantle these arrays? Legion, his expression cold as stone, replies, there is always a means to neutralize mechanical devices or formation constructs, they are, after all, the work of human hands. Cherian struggles to fully grasp the implications of his words as Legion elaborates, it's about anticipating the possibility that even the creator of the array could be ensnared by it. Humans detest problems with no solutions. This means that every creator embeds a failsafe for themselves. Cherian, intrigued yet uncertain, probes further, so, does that mean we can disassemble this formation array? Nearby, the companion of the Southern Peak young master listens intently to their exchange. Legion, his tone darkened with resignation, answers, dismantling an array is no simple undertaking, even for someone of my caliber. Glances toward Legion with an air of skepticism, her thoughts swirling. She wonders if Legion is exaggerating his abilities merely to impress Cherian, but begrudgingly acknowledges he is still far more capable than the Southern Peak young master. The latter, visibly shaken, mutters to himself about needing to inform his grandfather, trembling as though on the verge of collapse. Above them, the sky grows menacingly somber, shrouded by ominous clouds as flocks of birds flee, sensing the imminent peril. With no alternative, the group presses onward cautiously. Legion and Cherian walk together, their gazes darting about, hyper-aware of their surroundings. Phoenix and dragon symbols mark the diverging pathways, yet all roads seem to converge toward the same objective. Cherian, glancing at Legion, queries, if the paths are converging, does it mean we're nearing the exit? Legion replies, it's conceivable, though his unease deepens. The absence of any traps thus far feels disturbingly like the stillness before a violent storm. As they proceed, Legion's instincts sharpen, and he becomes acutely aware of something amiss. The ground beneath their feet feels peculiar, as if unnaturally hollow. Suddenly, the faint rattling of chains resonates from below. In an instant, the ground fractures and collapses, engulfing Legion and Cherian in a chaotic descent. Cherian, gripped by fear, shuts her eyes tightly, her thoughts racing, it's a trap, we're doomed. Meanwhile, Legion holds her firmly, his demeanor unyielding in the face of the turmoil. The others, equally panicked, experience the same disorienting plummet. Yet, as the dust settles, they find themselves not in an endless abyss but within what appears to be a mud-filled arena perched precariously along a cliffside. The disconcerting silence that follows only heightens the atmosphere, as each individual processes the abrupt transition into this foreboding and surreal environment. Cherian surveyed the treacherous mire, her voice tinged with mocking amusement as she remarked, is this supposed to be the original mechanism for the third gate? How juvenile. Her light-hearted tone was cut short as Legion, his demeanor rigid with seriousness, interjected sharply, no, the single word was enough to halt her movements. With a grim expression, he elaborated, this swamp isn't just some ordinary trap. As if on cue, the swamp began to shift unnervingly, pulling at the group like a voracious predator. The viscous terrain clung to their forms, dragging them further into its depths with each movement, while panic spread as they realized escape was futile. The more they flailed, the deeper they sank. Legion, his voice steady despite the situation, declared, this isn't an ordinary bog. It's a cursed quagmire laced with insulating sand. From above, the swamp stretched out like an endless, living prison, its vastness emphasizing the impossibility of their escape. Cherian, her tone betraying a mix of dread and confusion, questioned, insulating sand, cursed quagmire, what does that mean? Legion responded with a somber explanation, it's called that because the sand severs spiritual energy. It disrupts inner power and pulls you further in the more you struggle. Cherian's expression grew increasingly distraught as the weight of his words sank in. Whispering, she admitted, I never imagined a trap could be this intricate and fatal. Though clearly affected by the predicament, Legion outwardly maintained a composed facade. Extending his hand as if to gauge the energy around him, he attempted to harness his internal strength, only to find it unresponsive. Even the faint luminescence of his tattoos had dimmed, underscoring the dire circumstances. Muttering under his breath, he added grimly, this swamp isn't even the actual trap, it's just the appetizer. The swamp convulsed violently, and from its depths emerged an immense structure. The group, immobilized in the mire, turned their frightened gazes toward the monstrous apparatus that now loomed over them, a towering pillar crowned by a colossal, inverted blade. Its immense size rendered them insignificant in comparison. A man trapped nearby pointed shakily toward the mechanism, his voice quivering, "Look over there." All eyes locked onto the foreboding device. The blade, gleaming with an ominous sheen, seemed designed for one purpose: execution. The structure exuded an aura of death, and as the blade shifted slightly, its deadly intent became glaringly obvious. "That's no ordinary blade," murmured one of the bystanders, their voice barely audible. Cherian, overwhelmed by the sheer danger, turned to Legion and demanded, "What is this monstrosity?" Legion remained silent, his piercing gaze locked on the device, no doubt calculating their next move. A harsh metallic screech tore through the air as the blade moved with startling speed, slamming into the ground with an ear-splitting crash. The impact sent tremors through the swamp, narrowly missing several of the trapped individuals who screamed in terror. The sheer force of the descent left everyone reeling, their hearts pounding as the echoes of the crash lingered. A woman gasped in disbelief, her voice trembling, "That blade's real." As the blade slowly ascended back into its initial position, a collective sigh of relief swept through the group. However, their reprieve was fleeting. The entire structure began to tremble once more, and the blade started rotating horizontally, its movements now far more erratic and menacing. Cherian shrieked, "It's changed direction," while Legion remained silent, his sharp eyes fixed on the spinning mechanism, clearly formulating a strategy. One man, directly in the blade's path, let out a bone-chilling scream, his expression a mask of sheer desperation. Nearby, the ugly lunatic and his sister were also perilously close to the blade's reach. The lunatic sneered at the trapped man, spitting venomously, "That's your partner? What terrible luck." His sister stood frozen, her face a portrait of fear as the blade's shadow loomed closer. The trapped man, clinging desperately to the lunatic's clothing, begged, "Young master, please help me." His frantic tugging caused both of them to sink deeper into the deadly mire. The ugly lunatic, now visibly panicked, darted his eyes around for assistance, but no help came. His sister shouted in despair, "Do you want us both to die? Let him go." Her voice cracked with urgency, but the lunatic hesitated, torn between saving himself and the man's desperate cries. The mechanism roared to life once more, signaling the blade's imminent descent. The group watched in paralyzed fear as the blade's spinning form drew closer, its deadly edge promising only devastation. Death loomed like an unyielding storm, the tension in the air as sharp as the blade itself. In the blink of an eye, the unimaginable unfolded, the blade, descending with unrelenting velocity, tore through the mechanism like a comet slicing the heavens. The ugly lunatic's expression twisted into one of sheer terror, his jaw slackening as the grim realization struck, he was squarely within the blade's deadly reach. A scream, raw and primal, erupted, only to be drowned out by the sound of carnage. Blood sprayed across the mire, painting the swamp in grotesque crimson streaks. The cries of agony persisted, resonating like an eerie symphony until the scene was shrouded in a heavy darkness. When clarity returned, the ghastly tableau that emerged was enough to turn stomachs. The ugly lunatic and his sister stood drenched in gore, their faces and garments spattered with blood. Clutching a blood-streaked sword that still dripped crimson, the lunatic revealed the full scope of his actions. Overcome with frenzied desperation, he had severed the arms of the man clinging to his cape, a futile bid to liberate himself from the man's grip. The horrifying image expanded. What had initially appeared to be the blade's doing was, in part, the lunatic's own handiwork. The lifeless body, maimed and battered, lay as testament to the merciless sequence of events. Around them, witnesses recoiled, their expressions torn between revulsion and fear. The siblings' cold gazes fixated on the grim spectacle before them. The blade had struck its victim, but the lunatic's actions had sealed the man's fate. The lunatic, his pupils wide with panic, grappled with the consequences of his actions. Seeking solace in the midst of his spiraling doubt, he muttered internally, No, he was doomed anyway. He almost dragged me down with him." Nearby, the young master of the Northern Heaven Supreme family watched with detached calm. His icy eyes locked onto the lunatic as he spoke in a measured tone, "You made the right decision." The lunatic's attempt at self-justification faltered under the weight of these words. His face, which had borne a strained, hollow smile, now drained of all pretense. Beads of sweat traced frantic paths down his face as he clung to the statement, whispering to himself, "Yes, it was the right call." Yet the blood staining his hands told a different story, and a tempest of sinister thoughts swirled within his mind, threatening to consume him. Legion and Cherian, standing some distance away, silently observed the macabre turn of events. Cherian, her voice low and tinged with unease, remarked, "He's gone too far." Her gaze, shadowed with doubt, shifted toward Legion. With quiet introspection, she confessed, "I couldn't do what he did. If it were me, I'd have acted differently. Does that make me a bad person?" Her voice softened further, colored with shame. Legion, maintaining his composed demeanor, replied with an unusual note of reassurance, "The fact that you feel such remorse speaks volumes about your character. That alone is commendable." Cherian's eyes widened slightly, Legion's words cutting through her doubt. The phrase commendable enough lingered in her mind, rekindling a small spark of confidence. His stoic gaze unyielding, Legion added, "In this world, that kind of compassion is a rarity. Once you start questioning your morality, you risk losing yourself." Their exchange was abruptly interrupted by a panicked shout, dragging everyone's attention back to the towering device. The mechanisms shifting again, someone cried, their voice tinged with desperation. All eyes turned to the massive contraption, now groaning ominously. Cherian stared at the device, dread creeping into her thoughts. Yet, amidst the chaos, a strange certainty took root within her. Why do I still feel everything will turn out okay when he's around? She turned toward Legion, her hair catching a faint gleam of light as she said, "Let's figure out a way to escape." But before her words could fully escape her lips, she froze mid-sentence. Her face shifted to one of utter disbelief as she scanned the area. The once crowded swamp now felt eerily desolate. The oppressive air, the blood-streaked mud, all seemed to weigh heavier in Legion's absence. Panic gripped her chest as her voice broke through the suffocating silence, trembling with urgency. "Legion," she called, her plea echoing into the emptiness, unanswered. Cherian stood paralyzed, her thoughts spiraling as she tried to make sense of Legion's abrupt vanishing act. He must have gone to get help, she reasoned, attempting to steady her fraying nerves. There's no way he would disappear without a purpose. Yet, despite her efforts to reassure herself, an oppressive wave of unease weighed her down. Suddenly, an ominous shadow enveloped her, forcing her to glance upward. The mechanism had realigned, and the enormous blade now hovered directly above her, its gleaming surface catching the dim light in a sinister glow. Her eyes widened in abject terror as the horrifying reality set in. A sharp metallic screech pierced the silence as the device activated prematurely, the blade plunging downward with the ferocity of a meteor. Cherian could barely process the unfolding nightmare, let alone react to it. In the heartbeat before the blade would have struck, the ground beneath her swelled unnaturally, bulging like an overfilled balloon. To her astonishment, her legs, previously imprisoned by the tenacious quicksand-like mire, were suddenly freed. Relief surged through her, but it was fleeting. Without warning, a powerful force yanked her downward, pulling her body into the earth with terrifying speed. The world around her blurred into a chaotic swirl as she sank deeper, leaving the deadly blade and its devastating path far behind. Onlookers could do nothing but watch, aghast, as she disappeared into the ground as if the earth itself had claimed her. Cherian's mind raced, a whirlwind of panic and confusion, as she was dragged further into the unknown. The ground above her vanished into obscurity, and the blade that had loomed so menacingly over her became a distant memory. Swallowed by the mysterious forces below, she descended through layers of dense mud and earth until the suffocating darkness gave way to an unexpected brilliance. Her eyes widened as she found herself enveloped in a luminous blue hue, the clarity of the water around her almost otherworldly. The relentless tugging ceased abruptly, leaving her suspended in an expansive subterranean river. The water, cool and serene, momentarily soothed her frazzled senses. As the immediate terror subsided, Cherian became acutely aware of a faint energy coursing through her body. Glancing at her hand, she flexed her fingers, feeling a spark of vitality returning. "It's faint, but my internal energy is finally coming back. This water isn't suppressing my abilities, it's restoring them." A surge of relief washed over her as she looked around, taking in her surreal surroundings. She floated in what seemed to be an endless cavernous expanse, the subterranean river shimmering under a soft, ethereal light that filtered from above. Before she could fully absorb the scene, a presence nearby captured her attention. Turning her head, she froze, her gaze locking onto a familiar figure. He was holding her wrist with a firm yet gentle grip, his expression calm and reassuring. His hair swayed gently in the current, giving him an almost celestial appearance. As Cherian gets pulled in by our boy, all of a sudden her reaction changes. Legion let her go as she start getting pulled up by the water as our boy sinks deeper underwater and slowly but steadily he disappears. A stream of light bursts from the slob of mud, surprising everyone. It's none other than Cherian as she steadies herself high in the sky. As she stares at the trap, a voice calls for her, commanding her to cut off the mechanical device. Hearing the voice, she gets surprised and realizes that it's Legion's voice through transmission. As she quickly falls from the sky with great speed, she pulls out her sword and stabs it onto the weapon, barely managing to keep her out of the muddy water. All Cherian can smell is blood. She realizes that the weapon is huge, that she cannot do this on her own. If she wants to do it, she must at least wield sword chi, which she has never achieved. Then she notices a girl screaming in pain as others try to stop the bleeding since the machine cut off one of her legs. Scared by the sight, she looks the other way to see a massacre, many people lying dead while a few missing body parts. As the remaining people alive scream for help, Cherian gets nervous as her grip starts to waver. But since she is the only one in a position to provide help, she must do something. As she gets on top of the device, Legion tells her that he explained her the difference between a martial artist and master earlier. So she should just take a breath and believe that she can absolutely cut it. As the people on the swamp continue to scream and cry, Cherian thinks that she must cut it out before it changes direction again, so no one will be sacrificed. So she decides to block her hearing and only focus on her hearing. She remembers that since the first day she held a sword, she trained her martial arts without a single day of rest. As her eyes gleam with confidence, she decides to put everything she has into one strike. Cherian starts to glow as strong chi exudes from her body. Even the wind god's gloves that our boy gifted feels hot. She can feel her internal energy surging. As she feels she is ready, she launches her strike. She realizes that she had given it her all. As the strike hits the trap, the entire top starts to waver and Cherian notices that she actually managed to cut the blade from the device. The people who survived were dumbfounded when they see the device had been cut in half. Cherian gasps as she hears them quell in happiness that they can finally go back. As everyone reaches ground and Cherian now reunites with Legion, a man approaches our girl and thanks her for destroying the trap. But she also jumped across the swamp and pulled them all out. Cherian is in a loss of words, looking towards Legion because it was him who was the mastermind behind all this. He tells her to keep her mouth shut for the time being, so Cherian tells the man that it's not a big deal. As they leave, Cherian asks him that if it were not for him they would all be dead. Legion smiles at her, telling her that it's not the time for them to draw attention yet. Cherian cannot understand what he means by yet, and he might be planning something. She wonders how things turned into this massacre, and if this really was a coincidence that someone targeted the phoenix and dragons. Legion, like an auntie, tells her that there is no such things as coincidence in Jianghu. Legion explains that he doesn't know the exact reason, but this is not the work of a single individual, so he suspects that an unknown organization is involved. Cherian is confused, so our boy says that since they dared to against the Northern Heavenly Supreme Family, they are not ordinary people. The scene shifts to another place where a woman is resting, excluding an aura of unparalleled beauty. She fans herself as butterflies flies around her. She tells the old man sitting across that her people should already have started the act. Hearing her, the man remains blunt. She notices him not saying a word, so she tells him that he is still thinking that hiring a half-naked pervert was a mistake. The old man tells her that to him it's irrelevant, but what concerns him more is her intentions for hiring a turd like him for such a task. She stares at him intently and then closes her eyes. She continues to fan herself, excluding an aura telling him that she doesn't understand what's saying. Nonetheless, the art is god tier and she got crazy potential. Moving on to our group, as they walk across the jungle, a man shouts all of a sudden. To their excitement, they manage to find the exit. Seeing the gate, a few of them run towards the gate thinking that they made it out alive. Cherian asks Legion if this is really over, but our boy doesn't answer her. The people who went first halt as soon as they leave through the gate. Witnessing the head examiner playing hangman with a tree anymore, and this video will be flagged. Seeing him in this state, they are at a loss of words. Under him, all the dead bodies of the examiner lie while the group of pervert are having the time of their lives. The turds start shivering as they cannot believe that the Grandmaster is dead. Legion figure out that this is not the end, as they come face to face with the group of serial perverts. Legion looks at them with seriousness as the pervert turns around to see the group of survivors. As the head examiner is playing hangman with the tree, The pervert introduces himself and says that most people know him as the lecherous demonic scourge like any of us care. Hearing the name, everyone present is shocked, as their faces become stiff. Even Legion and Cherian are now more concentrated on him. This turd literally laughs, calling it an empty title. Cherian asks our boy if this pervert does something to women, you know what she means. Legion explains that this turd is an infamous creep that has violated countless women and uses them as human cauldrons. Which means he absorbs their vital energy to get stronger. He absorbs female chi. He further adds that once he targets someone, he drains their vitality completely and the person will end up in a state that neither life nor death. Legion as always doesn't care how strong he is, and jokes to Cherian that he is glad that he is not a woman. Cherian tells him that this is not the time for jokes. That's when Legion notices a gaze. A creep looks at him and call him a feast. This is so cringe that even Legion broke character for a second, which is rare. We move on the attention-seeking pervert who tells them that their employer ordered them to show everyone what true hell is. Cherian asks him what he meant by his employer and asks Legion if this is the organization he speak about. Our boy tells her that instead of killing them outright they are resorting to deprived acts, so to him this feels more like a vengeance than ambition. Then this pervert goes into character telling everyone that there are so many women here, but he can only absorb a certain amount of chi in a single day, so he wonders which one he should pick. Red-haired asks the fake protagonist if they should team up and get rid of the lust demon. The sensible guy asks him if they teamed they would be one shot by the head examiner who is playing hangman. So if they try to attack the pervert who made the game, they would be delusional if they thinks they can take him on. But there is always an ant. A certain noble young master pulls out his sword and tries to take him on. As the sword gets closer to the pervert, just smiles and, like a snake, his hand grabs around the retard's arm, bending his arm around. As the delusional fool screams in pain, the other thinks that this is a horrible outcome. Then the pervert grabs him by the neck and lifts him in the air. Then proceeds to insult him, telling him that he was yapping the most but he was just a dog that was all bark but no bite, so he warns him to lower his gaze. This guy actually has guts. Instead of lowering his gaze he curses at him, calling him a female dog, since his grandfather told him that a fight is all about spirit. To bring this delusional guy into reality he starts slapping him, blood spilling from his mouth. Seeing the gruesome scenario, everyone is stunned so much so that they can't even make a sound. The pervert continues to spam his slaps left and right, seriously injuring the kid. Cherian tells Legion that if all of them attack maybe they can stop him. Even she is delusional. My man has been one-shotting overpowered character, yet she thinks he is like them. Legion stops her from attacking and tells her that the pervert will not kill him. With a cold expression our boy tells her that as more time passes this experience will be a great source of strength for him in the long run. As blood drips from his shoes, delusional boy is so wounded that one more slap will probably kill him. As he cannot keep his up anymore he drops his gaze along with his head. Seeing this the pervert tells him that he should have done it much earlier, throwing him to the floor. As he drops senseless in the ground pervert find it very fun. As pervert was about to turn around he tells him that he should have been obedient from the start. But he notices that the Bioqua lending a hand to delusional kid. Seeing her the pervert asks her to introduce herself. As she does that with a normal confident tone, the pervert starts dreaming, telling her that she is the top beauty of Jiangu and as the rumors describe. Since she is from the prestigious Green Water Mountain her internal energy is bound to chaste as well. Bro is literally treating everything as a snack. Then he moves to the crowd and says that one will not be enough for him. Then he looks at the bunch and tells Cherian that she has also piqued her interests. Hearing this she gets shocked as pervert orders his subordinate to bring the ones he has selected, and keep the rest on watch. Hearing this the subordinate gets caught off guard. He informs the pervert that we're ordered to bring all of them and leave the island before anyone noticing. The pervert grabs him by the collar and tells him that they has been waiting for this moment for so long. Bro really likes cats, and continues that if any objections they will be killed on spot. A voice break their conversation. It was no one other than Legion. Another lackey tries to charge up, telling our boy how dare he be arrogant. Legion in the most cheesiest tone tells them that Cherian is his phoenix partner, so they will live and die together. Hearing this even the pervert stops his conversation looking at our boy. With the psychotic laugh Legion tells them that if they take her they should him along as well. Bro literally signed his death sentence when he chose our girl. The pervert thinks that our boy is a complete lunatic, so he orders his lackeys to bring alone the partner of both the women and he will show them some. As the group reaches a cave after some time, the pervert says that he has never seen women as beautiful as these two. As he faces the 4 people, staring at them, he says that he is less lucky that he didn't get one but instead got 2 snacks at one time. Then he says that our boy and Cherian looks like they are lover, and Legion just smiles calmly, which my friends is dangerous. He tells them that once he had a snack and the man could only watch and not do anything, which was very fun as he gets close to our girl, telling her that he looks forward to today as well. All of a sudden the fire lamenting the cave goes dark. The next instant the 2 people fall on the ground instantly. Noticing that his blood vessels are sealed, he panics. Taking out his weapon, he wonders who did it. As he looks at Cherian, he figure out that it's not him. In the pitch black room, he thinks that it might be Legion. Our boy gives him a side look confirming his suspicions, making him shocked and scared at the same time. Dude is uglier than the hero from Beauty and the Beast. Legion smirks at him, since he is just a psycho playing games with everyone. The pervert attacks our boy, but instead of doing anything he just starts laughing. Leaping in the air, he dodges the attack, shocking the pervert that our boy managed to dodge his attack. Legion lands on the chain charging towards him, and in an instant he lands an attack on him. Although he doesn't react much, the pervert starts laughing. He managed to block him attack, telling Legion that he is not an ordinary up-and-coming youngster. Legion doesn't care and laugh, telling him that it's pretty obvious. Rest in peace, pervert, you will never be remembered after next chapter. This part starts with the ugly pervert spamming his weapon, destroying his surroundings. Cherian carries both the turd that he neutralized earlier as the entire cave starts collapsing. Moving to the ugly pervert, because of the chaos he has caused, because of the rubble and dust, he cannot find Legion. As he continues to look around, curing our Chad, to his surprise he is behind the pervert ready to attack him. At the last moment he notices a presence behind him and barely manages to escape the fatal blow. As he wraps Legion's hand around with his chains, he is not very happy that our boy inflicted a wound on his beautiful face. Because of this wound, the women will get scared as he tosses Legion around. What's funny is that our boy doesn't really care. Legion easily balances himself and launches himself towards pervert, landing a gruesome kick so strong that he starts vomiting blood. Pervert gains his composure and stands on his feet, even more agitated, tries to attack our boy with a strong attack. With one hand Legion blocks his strike and with the other one he breaks his annoying weapon. As pervert continues to launch his attacks, he blocks every single one of his attack. Cherian cannot believe that the battle is this intense. She knew that our boy was very strong, but to not that degree. Is she for real? Because this is dumb. He already showed her a few feats not normal for most people. Moving on to the pervert, because of the intense attacks from our boy, pervert is having a hard time. He didn't expect a guy of Legion's caliber to be here. Because he was lost in his thoughts, he lost focus, wondering how Legion can be strong at such a young age. He notices that Legion is using a palm technique as waves of energy surround his hands. Pervert starts laughing because this is his strong point, as he confidently collides with our boy. As their palms collide, a huge wave of energy covers the entire area. This dumb delusional pervert thinks that Legion is dumb, because no matter how strong our boy is, he is only 20 years old, so he can never compete with the energy he has accumulated after collecting yin chi for years. Pervert suddenly notices that something is off because Legion is not losing no matter how much energy he uses. Veins starts popping all over his face as he uses everything he has. Because of this sudden rise in energy, the entire cave starts breaking down. As the cave starts shaking vigorously, Cherian thinks that the cave will not survive the shock. As this pervert out all of his energy that he has collected for decades, the cave can't handle their energy and falls down, exposing the moonlight that now brightens the entire area. Under the moonlight, the turd now faces a wall that he can never overcome. Cherian sees that the cave will collapse anytime. As they continue their dual cultivation position, the dust around them slowly starts to fade away. Legion tells him that he is so stupid that he killed so many people just for this mere strength. Pervert gets overwhelmed as Legion release a bit of his energy, throwing pervert onto a wall. The impact was so strong that it broke the wall, and made the pervert vomit blood. Pervert for the first time realizes that he is a side character and Legion is much stronger than him. Since he will die if he doesn't come up with something fast, he looks at Cherian, planning to grab her hostage, but bro just dig his own grave. Cherian notices the weapon approaching her at lightning speed. Legion on the other hand unleashes his demonic sword. As for Cherian is shocked to see what is going on. Pervert's chains get broken in half. He looks up to see Legion aiming for him head using that overpowered sword of his. Legion tells Cherian to close her eyes as his sword hit the ground, splitting it into half. Pervert cannot believe what Legion is even wielding, but he barely managed to dodge the blow. All of a sudden blood starts gushing from his mouth. Legion actually managed to cut off both of his arms. As Legion stares with him intently, Cherian stands in shock, not knowing just what is happening. Pervert tries to leap, planning to escape. Legion pulls out his god-tier sword, telling him that he has no chance of escaping. As Legion swings his large sword, the hit lands directly on Pervert's gut, splitting him in half. This turd is so helpless that he cries for help, but our Chad is no Barbie, so he continues to slash him, all while this loser cries in pain. Well, serves him right. Legion's eyes turn red as he gets engulfed by the sword, landing a strike so strong that it decapitates his head. Legion stares as blood splatters on his face. One of his eyes is yellow, the other one is red. Cherian witnesses the massacre. His head flies around in the air. Our Chad laughs at him as his last word asked who really Legion is. A group arrived at the cave, drawn by the strange, thunderous sounds emanating from within. As they entered, their eyes fell on the blood-soaked carnage and the lifeless body of their once almighty leader. They could not comprehend how someone so powerful had met such a brutal end. Their gazes shifted to Legion, standing amidst the chaos, his sword dripping with blood, his expression calm but deadly. Refusing to believe that this young man had single-handedly defeated their leader, one of them, filled with rage and disbelief, stepped forward and snarled, "Are you telling me this was all you're doing?" Their disdain and annoyance were palpable as they rejected the idea that the fight could have been fair. Fueled by denial, one of the men swung his sword at Legion, intending to end his life. In the blink of an eye, the attacker was cut in half, so swiftly that he didn't even register his death before collapsing to the ground in a fountain of blood. The sight of their comrade's instantaneous demise sent shockwaves through the others. Their confidence faltered as they watched the blood flow toward them like an ominous tide. Legion wasted no time. With an unwavering grip on his demonic blade, he launched into action. His movements were a blur of lethal precision. He slashed, leaped, and struck with devastating speed. Within moments, the remaining assailants fell one by one, their bodies crumpling under the relentless assault. Blood was everywhere, painting the walls and pooling on the ground, flowing like a river of crimson despair. The cave had transformed into a grotesque scene of devastation, a grim monument to Legion's unmatched fury. Amid this unholy tableau, Cherian stood at the sidelines, paralyzed by the horror unfolding before her. Her mind struggled to comprehend the massacre she had just witnessed. This was no ordinary fight, it was an annihilation, a dance of death orchestrated by Legion. Every inch of him, from head to toe, was soaked in blood, and the corpses of his enemies lay at his feet like offerings to a merciless god. Cherian's chest tightened as her thoughts raced. Was this truly the same man she had laughed with, the man who had shared quiet, simple moments at her home? The memories of his warmth and humor clashed violently with the nightmarish scene before her. As she stared at Legion, a devil incarnate amidst the bodies, she couldn't help but question if she ever really knew him at all. Legion, hearing her, turned his head a full 180 degrees toward her, and the sight sent chills down her spine. Then Legion broke the tense silence, his voice calm yet unsettling as he said, "I told you, you should have closed your eyes." Slowly, his expression began to soften, and his demeanor shifted back to his usual self. His crimson and brown eyes returned to their natural, matching hue, and the familiar, reassuring smile appeared on his face once more. The transformation was jarring, as though the bloodthirsty demon moments ago was a completely different person. Legion carefully sheathed his sword, though its overwhelming energy still radiated ominously. "I can't control myself when I draw this blade," he confessed, his tone laced with frustration and self-awareness. He explained to Cherian that the sword's power was far beyond his current ability to master, making it a dangerous weapon not just to his enemies but to himself as well. Cherian, still speechless from the carnage she had witnessed, listened intently. Breaking the silence, Legion revealed that the weapon had once belonged to his mother, an unexpected revelation that added a layer of mystery to his origins. As Cherian observed the terrifying blade, she couldn't help but reflect on how such an instrument of destruction could be tied to someone as significant as his mother. Sensing her unease, Legion shifted the conversation, introducing his father's weapon, a sword he carried but refused to draw. "I'll conquer the world with only my mother's weapon," he declared with unwavering determination. "I will never wield my father's sword." His words hinted at a deeper conflict, an unresolved resentment toward his father, as hinted at in previous encounters. When Cherian questioned why he carried the sword if he had no intention of using it, Legion dodged the question entirely, instead asking if she was alright. Cherian looked at him, still trying to reconcile the warm, kind Legion she knew with the blood-soaked warrior who had obliterated an entire group of enemies moments ago. After a brief pause, she replied that she was fine. Her gaze lingered on the corpses strewn across the cave, and she thought to herself, no matter what version of Legion I see, he's still him. As the night wore on, a group of people arrived, their voices filled with gratitude as they thanked someone profusely. "If it weren't for your intervention, we'd all be dead," they said, bowing repeatedly. But the person they were addressing, a young brat from the Southern Peak Alliance, stood awkwardly, trying to piece together what had happened. When he awoke in the cave, he found himself standing with a sword in hand and the bodies of his enemies scattered around him. Bewildered, he assumed he must have blacked out and done all of it in a trance. Legion and Cherian, having fabricated this version of events, supported his misunderstanding, explaining that the lecherous demon and his minions were already dead when they regained consciousness. The young man, gullible and eager to believe in his own greatness, concluded that his grandfather, the leader of the Southern Peak Alliance, must have secretly imbued him with unparalleled martial arts prowess. Lost in his delusion, he clenched his fist dramatically and looked toward the heavens, imagining his grandfather's proud face. "Thank you, grandfather," he muttered, fully convinced of his newfound strength. The scene was comical as the villagers bowed in reverence before their so-called savior, while Legion and Cherian exchanged knowing glances in the background. Meanwhile, Cherian's attention shifted to Legion, who had quietly moved to the lakeside, the moonlight casting a serene glow on him and his blade. She commented on how absurd it was for the young man to take credit for such a massacre, but Legion merely smirked. "I expected as much from someone like him," he replied. "Pride and status mean everything to those people." Cherian pondered his words, wondering if such things truly held so much importance. Their conversation was interrupted by someone announcing the arrival of a ship. "Our worship is here," they said as a small, imposing vessel approached the coast. The incident had triggered a ripple of changes, and Legion, with his determined stance, seemed fully aware of the shifting tides. Meanwhile, the Dragon and Phoenix tournament, which had already taken a dramatic turn, now reached an abrupt and mesmerizing conclusion, set against the backdrop of a grand castle shimmering under the night sky. We observe the head of the Northern Peak Alliance as a man approaches him, saying, "Exterminating that lecherous demonic scourge and rescuing those people, your grandson did an exceptional job." This man still seems oblivious to the truth. The old man, however, with his head lowered, understands the situation all too well. He responds, "That wasn't my grandson's doing." The man looks puzzled, replying, "I beg your pardon?" Unfazed, the old man elaborates that while his grandson's poison techniques were formidable, they weren't sufficient to defeat someone like the lecherous demonic scourge. Recognizing his grandson's limits, he sighs deeply. The man then asks, if not him, who could it have been? The old man, after a moment of thought, recalls Legion and mentions how he heard the boy participated in the tournament. The big man, now intrigued, asks, "Are you referring to that boy?" The old man nods, thinking back to the image of Legion, a memory etched deeply in his mind. He muses silently, could it really be him? Could that boy have defeated the scourge single-handedly? It's almost impossible, yet I can't shake the feeling he's somehow tied to this incident. The larger man suggests investigating Legion discreetly, but the old man waves off the idea. There's no need to provoke him unnecessarily. For now, we'll feign ignorance and observe. The man acknowledges this and then remarks, in any case, this is an opportunity to tarnish the reputation of the Northern Heaven Supreme family. The old man, however, calmly explains his decision to let this matter rest for now, much to the man's surprise. Of course, we could exploit this situation to our advantage, the old man says, but we can't risk digging a hole so deep it traps us as well. The man is visibly shaken by this revelation, realizing the potential for greater chaos. As the old man, with a manic glint in his eye, declares, "I don't know who's pulling the strings, but we will play along," the narrative shifts to a breathtaking landscape of towering peaks and lush forests. In the distance, someone mentions New Wind Manor, asking, "What is this place you mentioned?" It turns out to be Legion and Cherian, heading toward the manor. Legion reveals that the manor is his home, leaving Cherian visibly astonished. "This is your home?" she asks, her voice filled with disbelief. Internally, she marvels, just when I thought nothing he did could surprise me, he manages to outdo himself yet again. Legion opens the grand gates for her, explaining, "I built it with the intention of ushering in a new wind to sweep through Jianghu." As the gates creak open, Sherion's pupils dilate, mesmerized by the stunning palace and courtyard within. Though slightly smaller than her own home, it is still magnificent. When Legion asks her opinion, she responds, "It's stunning, but why is it so enormous?" Legion explains his vision of establishing a new sect here. Her jaw drops as he declares, "I'm naming it the Azure Heaven Sect." Delighted, she smiles brightly and praises the name, calling it beautiful. In a serene bamboo forest nearby, the two walk along a winding path. She compliments the picturesque back garden, asking when he started this ambitious project. Legion nonchalantly replies, "Just a few months ago." Suddenly, she halts, her expression changing as a dense fog rolls in. "Wait, is this an array?" she asks, her voice laced with curiosity. Legion nods casually, explaining, "Yes, it's a simple sound-blocking array, as though it were nothing extraordinary." They reach a massive door, and as Legion opens it, a radiant light bursts forth like the blazing sun. Sherian gasps as she steps inside, overwhelmed by the sight of an even larger sect under construction deep within the manor. Legion continues, "The real Azure Heaven sect is still being built here, within the heart of New Wind Manor." Sherian stands awestruck, her gaze sweeping across the vast, intricate structure, while Legion's unwavering eyes reflect his determination. From a bird's eye view, the Azure Heaven sect sprawls majestically, revealing its massive scale and the ambition behind its creation. Sherian is amazed because she is finding it hard to believe that there is such a space behind such an ordinary-looking manor. As for our overjoyed Legion, he tells her that in other words, the New Wind Manor is the entrance gate of the Azure Heaven sect. They are utilizing the gourd-like terrain of this place, so he is planning to handle everything using the New Wind Manor as a front. Our Chad brought all the laborers here with their eyes covered, that is for their own safety. He is going to build a training hall and dorm that can be used by several thousands of people. Sherian thinks that it is a hard thing because there are hardly any groups in Jianghu that can hold this scale of people, so she cannot figure out what our Chad is doing. Legion, with a serious look, explains that all this time, Jianghu was dominated by the four hegemons, so he is going to bring all of them down. Sherian cannot believe what he is saying. Exuding a graceful main character aura, Legion tells her that he is going to take their place. Moving to the Northern Heaven Supreme Family Wuhan branch, a turd bangs on the table, clearly expressing his anger. He tells everyone present that they entrusted their children with him because they had complete faith in him, blaming the unknown person that even if he lost one of his children, he wouldn't have said something like this. The other people present in the room think that they should stop him since he is crossing the line. The reason he is behaving this way is because he lost his greatest disciple, and his youngest daughter had her feet cut off. The mysterious turd starts speaking, telling him that as a father with children, he understands how the family heads are feeling. This deformed dumpling says that his house shall investigate this incident thoroughly since he expected something like this would have happened. In a flashback, we see that the butler informs the dumpling that many children lost their lives, so they won't remain quiet. This turd thinks it's unlucky because it happened on the third gate they had prepared in secret, so there must be a traitor within the household. As this half-naked dumpling becomes even more deformed, he asks the butler what he needs to do, and the butler tells him that he needs to turn everyone who made small contributions, including Yang Sohang, into perfect heroes, therefore creating a theory that the dead children died because they were weak. Soon enough, their deaths would drive their families to humiliation. Dumpling thinks it is a great idea, but if some don't cooperate, they will have to face unavoidable consequences. Moving to the present, the dumpling says that he fully acknowledges the responsibility, but this matter is also a matter of Jianghu. Even in the worst situation, the majority of the dragons and phoenixes survived. There were even dragons and phoenixes who saved their comrades and got rid of the enemies. The man becomes crazy, almost breaking the table, stating that if his grandson had died, he would have taken care of this matter this way. The dumpling gets overcooked, telling him why he keeps mentioning his grandson, and with a stern face, asks him if he should behead his grandson's head to satisfy him. The barking dog is at a loss for words. The old hag enters the conversation, telling the barking dog that she is aware that he is hurt, but anger cannot solve everything. The man, now very emotional, thinks that if they were the ones who hosted the tournament and his grandson had gotten his feet severed, the Blood King sect would have been annihilated. Since the dog cannot do anything, he barks, trying to express his anger. The man finds this frustrating and cannot imagine how many people the dumpling has trampled on to come all the way to his position right now. The law of the jungle is the most important essence of Jianghu. The old hag thinks that today might be the last day she will ever see the Blood King sect leader. Moving on to Legion, he tells our girl that a green forest group called the Wind Mountain Group is setting up camp in this mountain, but they've been demanding money under the pretense of protection fees. With a smile, our psycho tells her that he is on his way to get rid of them. Cherian thinks that our Chad might go berserk, killing everything in his path. She asks him if there won't be people who were originally kind but had no choice but to become bandits to feed themselves. Our Chad tells her that there are no kind thieves, making it clear that good people are always good. As Cherian tries to convince him, they come across two minions guarding the door. They notice our Chad coming towards them and think that Cherian looks great, but they cannot just let them leave easily, so they approach them fast. As one of these retards tries to behead our lazy Chad, Legion asks Cherian if he is a demonic murderer. Cherian, noticing the move, tells him to dodge. With his bare hands, our Chad grabs the blade and throws him towards the tree with great force. The impact is so great that he vomits blood, instantly knocking him out. Cherian now realizes what he meant by not killing them. Another minion thinks of attacking, but his body freezes. Legion looks towards him and then gives him his psychotic laugh. Our Chad leaps in the air and tells him that he could have beaten them up and chased them away. Moving on to their camp, screams of pain can be heard. Cherian beats up multiple minions at a time. Legion, flying in the air, suggests to her that if she hesitates, she will die. As one retard tries to finish her off, she hits his vital points, instantly finishing him off. She tells our Chad that her martial arts have improved immensely. Legion grabs a minion by his face and almost buries him into the ground, asking him if it felt good. He shifts his attention to his girl, telling her that she can get even stronger because of this feeling. All of a sudden, something is aimed toward them. Cherian, noticing the attack, cuts the hidden weapon in half, but the medicine instantly spreads through her body. She notices that she has inhaled the weird powder. A busybody enters the scene, telling our guys that they must not be ordinary martial artists if they killed this many minions. This guy is the leader, telling our Chad that not everything can be solved by martial arts. Cherian asks if this is poison, but the man elaborates that it's poison mixed with an aphrodisiac, so her body will become hot, and she will embrace just any man now. If she doesn't mate with a man, she will die because of the poison. Since he cannot kill the people who destroyed his bandit group, Legion, taking this opportunity, tells her not to worry since there is a man available. This is none other than our Riz Lord Legion. This concludes the video. Make sure to like and subscribe for another part.